The bus rattled into Coldwater, Texas just after dawn, spitting dust and diesel fumes into air already thick with heat. Colt Rayner was the only passenger who got off, and he stood there for a long moment on the cracked asphalt, watching the Greyhound pull away like it was taking the last piece of his dignity with it. He was 38 years old and looked 50. His left knee clicked when he walked, a souvenir from a bull named Widowmaker in Cheyenne 3 years back. His right shoulder sat wrong in its socket, courtesy of a bronc in Amarillo the year before that. He carried everything he owned in a duffel bag that had seen better decades, and he wore boots that were held together more by habit than leather. Coldwater hadn't changed. Main Street still had the same sun-bleached storefronts, the same faded advertisements painted on brick walls promising deals from 1987. The hardware store, the diner with its flickering neon sign that said Eats, but the E had been dark since Colt was in high school. The feed supply, the bar that opened at 10 in the morning for the men who needed it. Colt limped down the sidewalk, feeling eyes on him from every window. Small towns had long memories, and Coldwater's was longer than most. "Well, I'll be damned," a voice called out. "Colt Rayner, thought you were dead." Colt turned to see Jimmy Vance leaning against the door of the hardware store, a toothpick working its way across his tobacco-stained teeth. Jimmy had been in Colt's graduating class, back when graduating felt like escaping. "Not yet," Colt said. "Close enough, from the look of you." Jimmy's eyes traveled down to Colt's knee, to the way he favored his left side. "Heard you were still chasing that buckle out west." "Was. Past tense, huh?" Jimmy grinned, but there was no warmth in it. "Well, welcome home, superstar. Your sister's going to be thrilled." Colt didn't respond. He just kept walking, each step a negotiation between his body and his will. The walk from Main Street to his father's house took 20 minutes. Would have taken 10 if his knee wasn't screaming. The house sat at the end of Mesquite Road, a weathered ranch style with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged on one side like a broken promise. The yard was overgrown, the mailbox hung crooked, and someone had nailed a piece of plywood over one of the front windows. The front door was locked. Colt tried the spare key under the ceramic frog by the porch steps. His mother's frog, been there since he was 8 years old. The key was gone. "He's not there." Colt turned. His sister Claire stood at the edge of the property line, arms crossed over her chest. She'd always been small, but life had made her smaller and harder, like a stone worn down by river water until all the soft parts were gone. "Claire," Colt said. "Don't, Bo." She held up one hand. "Don't you Claire me like we're family that talks. We are family. Family shows up. Family doesn't disappear for 3 years without a phone call." She walked toward him, and Colt could see the lines around her eyes, the gray starting to thread through her dark hair. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see Dad." "Now? Now you want to see him?" Claire's voice cracked, and she steadied herself. "Where were you when he fell? Where were you when he stopped remembering my name? Where were you when I had to decide whether to keep him in a house he couldn't live in anymore?" Colt looked at the house, at the plywood window. "What happened?" "He tried to make coffee, forgot the pot. Fire department said if Mrs. Henderson hadn't seen the smoke, the whole place would have gone up." Claire's eyes were hard. "He doesn't live here anymore, Colt. He can't." "Where is he?" "Somewhere safe, somewhere clean. Somewhere he gets 3 meals a day and people who actually give a damn." She turned away. "You should go back to wherever you came from." "Claire, you don't get to do this." She spun back around, and now there were tears cutting tracks down her face. "You don't get to ride in here like some kind of hero after all this time. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who watched him forget everything. I'm the one who held his hand when he asked for Mom, when he asked for you, when he didn't know who the hell I was. So no, Colt. You don't get to see him. You don't get to ease your guilty conscience. You just get to leave." She walked away then, back toward her car, a practical Honda with a car seat in the back. Colt watched her go and felt the full weight of every mile he'd run, every choice he'd made, every moment he'd chosen the road over the people who stayed. The Coldwater Care Center sat on the north edge of town, a low brick building that tried to look cheerful with its flower beds and white trim, but couldn't quite hide what it was. The place where people went when there was nowhere else for them to go. Colt stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes before he went inside. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. A woman in scrubs sat behind a desk, typing something into a computer that looked like it had been manufactured in the previous century. "Help you?" she asked without looking up. "I'm here to see Wade Rayner." Now she looked up. "You family?" "His son." Her expression shifted, something between pity and judgment. "Claire told us you might show up. She said—" "I know what she said. Can I see him or not?" The woman studied him for a long moment. "Sign in. Room 14, down the hall. Take a left." Colt signed the sheet, his handwriting worse than it used to be. Too many broken fingers. Too much scar tissue. The hallway was long and fluorescent bright. Every few feet, a door stood open to reveal a small room with a bed, a chair, a television playing to no one. Old men and women in those rooms, some sleeping, some staring at nothing, some calling out to people who weren't there. Room 14 was at the end of the hall. Wade Rayner sat in a chair by the window, looking out at a courtyard that contained a single picnic table and a bird feeder. He was smaller than Colt remembered, thinner. His hair had gone completely white, and his hands shook slightly where they rested on the arms of the chair. "Dad," Colt said. Wade didn't turn. Colt stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Dad, it's me. It's Colt." Slowly, Wade's head turned. His eyes were blue and distant, like he was looking at something very far away. "Colt," he said, and for a moment there was recognition there, bright and clear. Then it faded, like a radio signal slipping between stations. "Where's your mother?" "She's—" Colt stopped. His mother had been dead for 12 years. "She's not here right now. She said she'd be back, said she was just going to the store." Wade looked back out the window. "That was hours ago. I should go look for her." "No, Dad. You should stay here." "I don't like it here." Wade's voice dropped to a whisper like he was sharing a secret. "The food tastes wrong. The bed's not mine. And there's a woman. She comes in at night, tries to tell me what to do. I don't know her. Where's Evelyn? Where's your mother?" Colt pulled the other chair over and sat down. His knee throbbed. "Tell me about the ranch." Wade blinked. "The ranch?" "Yeah, tell me about the horses. About teaching me to ride." Something cleared in Wade's eyes, like clouds moving away from the sun. "You were 4 years old, smallest damn cowboy I ever saw. Your mother said you were too young, but I put you on that mare anyway. What was her name?" "Dolly." "Dolly." Wade smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man Colt remembered. "You held on like your life depended on it. Didn't cry once, even when you fell off into that mud puddle. You laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. Your mother wanted to kill me." Wade's hands stopped shaking. "Those were good days. When the ranch was still ours. Before the drought. Before we had to sell the land. Before—" He stopped, the clarity fading again. "Before everything went wrong." They sat in silence for a while, and Colt watched his father's face cycle through emotions he couldn't name. Confusion, sadness, brief sparks of something that looked like fear. "I fell," Wade said suddenly. "I know. I forgot to— There was a fire, wasn't there? The coffee pot." He looked at Colt, and there was desperation in his eyes now. "I don't remember. Why can't I remember?" "It's okay, Dad." "It's not okay." Wade's voice rose, loud enough that a nurse appeared in the doorway. Colt waved her away. "Nothing's okay. I'm in this place, and I don't know why. I don't know what day it is. I can't remember if I had breakfast. Sometimes I can't remember—" His voice broke. "Sometimes I can't remember your name." Colt reached out and took his father's hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. "My name's Colt," he said quietly. "I'm your son, and I'm going to get you out of here." That night, Colt slept in his truck in the parking lot of the Coldwater Inn because he couldn't afford a room. The truck was a '98 Ford that ran on prayer and spite, and the passenger seat folded down just enough that he could almost stretch out. Almost. His knee bent the wrong way and his shoulder pressed against the door, and he didn't sleep so much as drift through the dark hours between midnight and dawn. At 7 in the morning, someone rapped on the window. Colt jerked awake, reaching for— what? He didn't even own a weapon. Years on the road had taught him that everything you carried was something someone could take. The face in the window belonged to Tom Garrett, Coldwater's sheriff, and a man Colt had once considered a friend, back when friendship meant sharing a six-pack behind the high school bleachers. Colt rolled down the window. "Morning, Tom." "Colt." Tom's face was professionally neutral. "Heard you were back. Word travels fast. It's a small town. Mind stepping out of the vehicle? Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. Just want to talk." Colt opened the door and unfolded himself from the truck, every joint protesting. Tom watched him with the careful attention of someone who'd seen too many bad situations start with good intentions. "Claire called me," Tom said. "She's worried." "Claire's always worried. She's worried you're going to do something stupid." Colt leaned against the truck. The morning sun was already hot, turning the parking lot into a skillet. "Like what?" "Like try to take your father out of that care facility." Tom's eyes were steady. "She's got legal guardianship, Colt. Signed papers. Judge Henley approved it. If you interfere with that, I'll have to bring you in." "He's my father. And he's not capable of making decisions for himself anymore. You weren't here. You don't know how bad it got." Tom softened slightly. "I was there the night of the fire. He was standing in the kitchen in his underwear, holding a fire extinguisher, crying because he didn't know how to use it. Mrs. Henderson had already called 911. We found him like that, confused, scared, not knowing where he was. Claire had to make the hard choice, the right choice." "The right choice," Colt repeated bitterly. "That's what we call it when we lock people away? We call it that when we keep them safe." Tom straightened his hat. "Look, I get it. You feel guilty, but guilt's not a plan. You've been gone 3 years. You don't have a job, you don't have money, you don't have a place to live. What exactly are you going to do for him?" Colt didn't have an answer. Tom waited, then nodded. "That's what I thought. Go see him if you want, talk to him, but don't make this harder than it needs to be. And don't make me come after you." He walked back to his patrol car, leaving Colt standing in the parking lot with the sun beating down and his knee throbbing and the full weight of his own uselessness pressing on his chest like a boulder. The diner was called The Broken Spoke, and it had been called that since 1967. Colt sat at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been made during the same decade, and tried to figure out what came next. The waitress was new, or at least new to Colt. Young, maybe 25, with tattoos running down both arms and a name tag that said Jess. "You want some breakfast?" she asked. "Can't afford it." She raised an eyebrow. "Coffee's $2. "I can afford $2. "Then I guess you can afford eggs and toast. On the house." She walked away before he could argue. 10 minutes later, she set a plate in front of him. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, 3 strips of bacon that looked like they'd been cooked by someone who actually gave a damn. "Why?" Colt asked. "Why what? Why feed a stranger for free?" Jess shrugged. "You look like you need it." Plus, Jimmy Vance was in here earlier, running his mouth about how Colt Rayner came crawling back to town. "I figured anyone Jimmy hates can't be all bad." Colt almost smiled. "Sound logic." "I'm a waitress in a small-town diner. Logic's all I got." She refilled his coffee. "You really used to ride bulls?" "Used to." "Why'd you stop?" "They stopped letting me win." She laughed at that, a real laugh. And Colt felt something loosen in his chest. He ate the eggs. They were good. The door chimed and Mara Chen walked in. Colt froze, fork halfway to his mouth. He hadn't seen Mara in 6 years. Not since the night he'd told her he was leaving, that he had one more season in him, one more chance at the championship, and he couldn't do it if he stayed in Coldwater. She'd looked at him with those dark, steady eyes and said, "Then go, but don't expect me to wait." He'd gone. She hadn't waited. Now she stood in the doorway of the Broken Spoke, wearing work boots and jeans and a canvas jacket with Chen and Sons Construction embroidered on the back. Her black hair was pulled into a ponytail, and there were new lines around her eyes, but she was still the most beautiful thing Colt had ever seen. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Mara walked to the counter, sat down 2 seats away from Colt, and ordered coffee. Black, no sugar, same as always. "Mara," Colt said. "Colt. You look—" "Don't." She held up one hand. "Don't do the small talk thing. Don't tell me I look good. Don't ask how I've been. Okay? They sat in silence. Jess brought Mara's coffee and wisely retreated to the other end of the counter. I heard you were back, Mara said finally, staring into her cup. I heard you went to see Wade. News really does travel fast. It's Coldwater. A dog barks on the north side of town. Everyone on the south side wants to know why. She took a sip of coffee. How is he? Bad. Worse than I thought. Claire did what she had to do. Everyone keeps saying that because it's true. Mara turned to look at him now, and her eyes were hard. She was here, Colt. She was the one who dealt with it. Where were you? I was chasing something that was never going to catch you back. Mara's voice was quiet, but it cut deeper than shouting. You always were good at running. I know. Do you? She set her cup down. Do you know what it was like after you left? Wade used to come into the hardware store every Saturday asking if I'd heard from you. At first I had to tell him no. Then, after a while, he stopped asking because he couldn't remember you'd left. Then he stopped coming to the store because he couldn't remember where it was. And through all of that, Claire was there, day after day. While you were off playing cowboy, Colt stared at his plate. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. She stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the counter, even though she'd barely touched her coffee. Wait, Colt said. Mara, wait. She stopped at the door. What? I'm not leaving this time. She looked at him for a long moment, and Colt saw something in her face that might have been hope or might have been pity. We'll see, she said, and then she was gone. Colt spent the afternoon walking through Coldwater, relearning the geography of his past, the high school where he'd been somebody, the park where he'd kissed Mara for the first time under the oak tree that had probably been there since Texas was still Mexico. The rodeo grounds at the edge of town, empty now, the bleachers full of rust and bird nests. He found himself standing at the fence, looking out at the arena where he'd once been golden, 15 years old, and fearless, riding anything they'd put him on. The crowds cheering, his father in the stands, proud. Before the injuries, before the losses, before the slow realization that talent wasn't enough when your body started breaking down faster than your spirit. Thinking about a comeback? Colt turned to see an old man leaning against a truck, watching him with amusement. It took him a moment to recognize Hank Sullivan, former stock contractor, former champion, former everything. Hank had to be 70 now, maybe older, but he still had that look, the kind of toughness that came from getting thrown and getting back up more times than anyone could count. No, Colt said, just remembering. Memory's a dangerous thing for men like us. Hank walked over to the fence, moving slow but steady. I heard you were back. Heard about Wade, too. Sorry about that. He was a good man. He still is. Of course, of course. Hank pulled out a pouch of tobacco and started rolling a cigarette. But being good don't stop the mind from going. My wife had it. Alzheimer's. Watched her fade for 5 years until she didn't know her own name. Hardest thing I ever did was keep breathing through it. How'd you manage? Badly. Hank lit the cigarette, took a long drag. I drank too much. I yelled at doctors. I made promises I couldn't keep. But I stayed. That's all you can do, stay. Even when staying hurts worse than leaving. Colt nodded, not trusting himself to speak. You were good, you know, Hank said, looking out at the empty arena. Before you left, maybe even great. You had something most of these boys don't, heart. You could get beat to hell and still get back on. That's rare. Didn't help much in the end. Maybe not, but it's the kind of thing that don't go away just because you stop using it. Hank dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Heart ain't just for riding bulls, son. Sometimes it's for staying in one place long enough to do the right thing. He climbed back into his truck and drove away, leaving Colt alone with the ghosts of who he used to be. That evening, Colt went back to the care center. The same nurse was at the desk, and this time she barely looked at him as he signed in. Wade was in his room, sitting in the same chair, looking out the same window at the same courtyard that hadn't changed since morning. Hey, Dad! Wade turned, and Colt saw the confusion in his eyes, that terrible moment of not recognizing, of searching for a connection that kept slipping away. It's Colt, he said. Your son. Colt. Wade's face cleared slightly. You came back. Yeah, I came back. Where were you? Away, but I'm here now. Wade nodded slowly. Good. That's good. I don't like it here much. The food's no good. And they make me take pills, so many pills. I told them I don't need pills, but they don't listen. Colt sat down in the other chair. What do you need, Dad? Wade thought about it, his face working through the effort of holding on to a thought long enough to speak it. I want to go home. I want to be in my own house. I want to sit on the porch and watch the sun go down. Is that too much to ask? No, Colt said quietly. It's not too much. They sat together as the light outside faded, as the courtyard emptied, as the day surrendered to evening. At some point, Wade fell asleep in his chair, and Colt stayed there, watching his father's chest rise and fall, listening to the sound of his breathing. A nurse came in eventually. Visiting hours are over. Just a few more minutes. I really need you to Please. Colt looked at her, and something in his face made her stop. Just a few more minutes. She hesitated, then nodded and left. Colt sat there until the nurses started the night shift rounds, until they came to check on Wade and give him his evening medication. He watched them wake his father, watched the confusion return to Wade's eyes, watched him take the pills without understanding why. When they were done, Wade looked at Colt like he was seeing him for the first time. Who are you? He asked. Nobody, Colt said, standing up. Just somebody passing through. He walked out of the care center with his jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists, and he didn't stop walking until he reached his truck. He sat there in the parking lot as the sky turned purple and the first stars came out, and he made a decision that would change everything. He was going to get his father out of there. He didn't know how. He didn't know what came after. But he knew with absolute certainty that Wade Rayner was not going to die in a room that smelled like disinfectant, staring out at a courtyard with a single bird feeder, forgetting who he was one day at a time. Colt pulled out his phone, an ancient flip phone held together with electrical tape, and called the one person who might understand. Mara answered on the third ring. What do you want, Colt? I need help. There was a long pause. With what? Something stupid. Another pause, longer this time. Then, I'll meet you at the diner. 20 minutes. She hung up before he could thank her. The broken spoke was empty except for Jess wiping down tables and an old man nursing a piece of pie in the corner booth. Colt sat at the counter, drinking coffee he didn't want, waiting. Mara came in wearing the same canvas jacket, but she'd let her hair down, and Colt remembered how it used to feel running through his fingers, silk and smoke. She sat down next to him. Talk. I want to get my dad out of the care center. No. You didn't let me finish. I don't need you to finish. The answer's no. Mara shook her head. Claire has legal guardianship. The care center's the safest place for him. You don't have a plan, you don't have money, and you don't have any idea what you're doing. I know all that. Then why are you even considering this? Because he asked me to take him home. Colt turned to look at her. He looked me in the eye and asked me to take him home, and I'm done saying no to him. That's guilt talking. Maybe. Probably. But it's also the truth. He doesn't belong there, Mara. You should see him, sitting in that room, confused, scared, asking about my mom like she's still alive. They're just warehousing him until he dies. They're keeping him safe. From what? Living? Colt's voice rose, and Jess glanced over from across the diner. He lowered his voice. Safe is just another word for giving up. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What exactly are you asking me to do? I need help getting him out. I need a place to take him, and I need... He stopped, the words harder than he expected. I need someone to tell me I'm not completely insane. You are completely insane. But... She looked at him, really looked at him, the way she used to back when they were young and stupid and thought love could save everything. But I remember Wade teaching me how to fix a fence when I was 12, and my dad was too busy drinking to care. I remember him showing up to my high school graduation because he knew my parents wouldn't. I remember him being there when nobody else was. She took a breath. So yeah, I'll help you. Not because I think this is a good idea, not because I forgive you for leaving, but because Wade Rayner deserves better than dying in a room by himself. Colt felt something crack open in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to blow up in your face, and when it does, I'm going to say I told you so. Fair enough. They sat there for a while, two people who used to be everything to each other, now just two people trying to do one good thing in a world that didn't make it easy. We'll need a plan, Mara said finally. I've got one. Let me guess. Walk in, take him, deal with the consequences later? More or less. That's not a plan, Colt. That's a prison sentence. She pulled out her phone. Give me 2 days. I'll figure something out. 2 days? 2 days. And in the meantime, you stay away from the care center. Don't visit, don't call, don't do anything that makes Claire or Tom nervous. Can you do that? I can try. That's what I'm afraid of. She stood up, leaving money on the counter again. Meet me here at noon on Saturday. And Colt? Yeah? Don't make me regret this. She walked out, and Colt sat there with his cold coffee and his bad knee and the first real hope he'd felt in years. The next 2 days crawled by like wounded animals. Colt stayed away from the care center, but he couldn't stay away from his father's house. He went there in the mornings, let himself in through the back door with a credit card, still the same cheap lock from when he was a kid, and walked through rooms that felt like museums dedicated to a life that no longer existed. His parents' bedroom, still made up with his mother's quilt. The living room with Wade's chair, worn smooth in the shape of his father's body. The kitchen where the coffee pot had started the fire. Someone had replaced it with a new one, probably Claire. And that small gesture of practicality made Colt irrationally angry. He started cleaning. He didn't have money or a plan or any of the things he actually needed, but he could sweep floors and wipe down counters and throw away the accumulated dust of abandonment. He fixed the plywood window, replacing it with glass from the hardware store that he put on a credit card that was already maxed out. On Friday afternoon, he was scrubbing the bathroom when someone knocked on the front door. Colt opened it to find Claire standing there, her face tight with fury. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Cleaning. This isn't your house anymore." "It's not yours either. It's Dad's." "Dad can't take care of a house, Colt. He can barely take care of himself." She pushed past him, looking around at what he'd done. "What is this? What are you planning?" "I'm not planning anything." "Bullshit. Tom told me he warned you to stay away. Tom told me you were talking to Mara. I know you, Colt. I know when you're about to do something stupid." "Then you know there's no point in trying to stop me." Claire's face went red. "You think this is a game? You think you can just waltz in here and play hero after all this time? I'm the one who's been dealing with this. I'm the one who watches Dad forget everything. I'm the one who has to make the hard choices while you're off. Off where exactly? Where have you been, Colt? What have you been doing that's so important you couldn't come home?" "Failing," Colt said quietly. "I've been failing." The admission seemed to take the wind out of Claire's anger. She sat down on the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't want to fight with you," she said. "I'm so tired of fighting." "Then don't." "It's not that simple. Dad needs professional care. He needs medication, supervision, a safe environment. I can't give him that. You sure as hell can't give him that." "What if there was another way?" "There isn't." "But what if there was?" Claire looked at him, and Colt saw something in her face that might have been desperation or might have been the last dying ember of hope. "Even if there was," she said slowly, "even if you could somehow make it work, it wouldn't last. Whatever you're thinking, whatever plan you've got, it'll fall apart. And when it does, I'll be the one picking up the pieces. Again. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely." She stood up, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. "Don't do this, Colt, please. Just let it be." "Can't. Can't or won't." Same thing at this point. Claire walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the handle. "When this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, don't come looking for my help. Don't ask me to fix it. You're on your own." "I've always been on my own." She flinched at that, and Colt wished he could take it back. But the words were out there now, floating in the space between them like ghosts of all the things they'd never said to each other. "Yeah," Claire said quietly. "I guess you have." She left, and Colt stood in his father's empty house, surrounded by the evidence of cleaning that wouldn't change anything, fixing what couldn't be fixed. Saturday came up cold and gray, the kind of morning that promised rain but never delivered. Colt met Mara at the Broken Spoke at noon, like she'd asked. She was already there, sitting in a corner booth with papers spread across the table. "You look nervous," she said as he sat down. "Should I be?" "Probably." She pushed a folder across to him. "I made some calls, did some research. This is what we're dealing with." Colt opened the folder. Inside were printouts of legal documents, medical forms, guardianship papers, a bureaucratic maze that made his head hurt just looking at it. "Claire has full legal authority," Mara explained. "Judge Henley signed off on it 6 months ago. As long as she maintains that guardianship, Wade stays in the care center. If you try to take him without her permission, that's kidnapping, or custodial interference, or about 5 other charges that end with you in a cell. So we need Claire's permission, which she'll never give. Then we're back to the walk-in and take-him plan." "No," Mara leaned forward. "There might be another way. If Wade was capable of making his own decisions, if he could demonstrate that he understands the situation and wants to leave, then his wishes might override the guardianship. Might. It's not guaranteed, but it's better than committing a felony. How do we prove he can make decisions? We'd need a doctor to evaluate him, someone who could testify that he has lucid periods, that he understands the consequences, that he's not being coerced. Do you know a doctor like that?" "No, but I know someone who might." She pulled out her phone, typed something. "There's a retired psychiatrist in Austin, Dr. Helen Song. She used to work with dementia patients, did a lot of advocacy work about patient rights and end-of-life care. I reached out to her. She's willing to talk." Colt stared at her. "You set this up already?" "I told you I'd figure something out." Mara's expression was unreadable. "This doesn't mean it'll work. It just means we might have a chance." "When can we talk to her?" "She can come up next weekend, but Colt—" Mara's voice turned serious. "Even if Dr. Song evaluates Wade, even if she says he's capable of making this choice, we still need a plan. Where's he going to live? Who's going to take care of him? How are you going to pay for any of this?" "I'll figure it out." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Mara closed her eyes, like she was asking for patience from a god she'd stopped believing in. "You're impossible." "I know. And you're going to do this no matter what I say." "I am." "Then I guess I'm in." She gathered up the papers, shoving them back into the folder. "But we do this right. We do it legal. And if it doesn't work, if Wade can't pass the evaluation, or the judge says no, or Claire gets you thrown in jail, then you accept it. You let it go. And if it does work, then you better be ready for the fight of your life. Because Claire won't take this lying down, neither will the care center. And small-town Texas isn't exactly known for being progressive when it comes to challenging the system. I fought bulls with worse odds. Bulls don't call lawyers, Colt." He couldn't argue with that. They sat there in the diner, making a plan that was probably doomed to fail. And Colt felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. It scared the hell out of him. But it beat the alternative, which was watching his father disappear one forgotten memory at a time while Colt did nothing. "One more thing," Mara said as they stood to leave. "If we're really doing this, if we're going up against Claire and the court and everyone else, you need to understand something." "What?" "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Wade. And when it's over, when your dad's settled or this whole thing falls apart, you and me, we're done. No second chances. No trying again. I helped you once, but I'm not going back to who I was when I believed in you." The words hit harder than any bull ever had. "Understood," Colt managed. "Good." She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth. I hope it works out. Wade deserves that much." Then she was gone, leaving Colt standing in an empty diner with a folder full of legal documents and a heart full of something that felt dangerously close to hope. The week that followed moved like a slow-motion train wreck, inevitable, visible from miles away, and impossible to stop. Dr. Helen Song arrived in Coldwater on a Saturday morning, driving a silver Prius that looked completely out of place among the pickup trucks and rust bucket sedans that populated the town. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair cut short, and eyes that suggested she'd seen every kind of human suffering and refused to look away from any of it. Colt met her in the parking lot of the Coldwater Inn, the only motel in town that didn't rent rooms by the hour. "Mr. Reiner," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for coming all this way." Mara made a compelling case on the phone, and I've spent 30 years watching the system fail people like your father. If I can help, I will. She pulled a briefcase from her car. But I need to be clear about something before we proceed. I evaluate patients based on their actual cognitive state, not on what their family wants me to find. If your father truly cannot make informed decisions, I'll say so. Are we understood? Yes, ma'am. Good. When can I see him? Today, if you're willing. Visiting hours start at 10. Dr. Song checked her watch. Then we have an hour. Walk me through his condition. Everything you know. They sat on a bench outside the motel, and Colt told her everything. The fire, the confusion, the moments of clarity that came and went like radio signals. He told her about Wade asking for his mother, about the way his hands shook when he tried to remember things, about the fear in his eyes when he couldn't recognize his own son. Dr. Song listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather journal that looked like it had survived a war. "Memory loss doesn't always mean incapacity," she said when he finished. "Dementia exists on a spectrum. Bull. Some patients retain the ability to make decisions about their own care even when they can't remember what they had for breakfast. The question isn't whether your father can remember everything. It's whether he can understand the situation, weigh the options, and express a consistent choice. And if he can, then legally his wishes should be respected. But should and will are different things, Mr. Reiner. The court system tends to favor safety over autonomy. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that even if your father passes my evaluation, a judge might still side with your sister." "I understand. I hope you do." Dr. Song closed her journal. "Because what you're attempting here, it's not just about bringing your father home. It's about challenging a system that's designed to make exactly these kinds of decisions for people who can't make them for themselves. That system exists for good reasons. Sometimes it fails. But sometimes it's the only thing standing between vulnerable people and those who would exploit them. I'm not trying to exploit him. I know. But the court won't know that until we prove it." She stood up, smoothing her slacks. "Let's go see your father." The drive to the care center took 5 minutes. Colt's hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and he realized with some shame that he was more nervous now than he'd ever been climbing onto the back of a 2,000-pound bull. The nurse at the desk recognized Colt and waved them through without question. Dr. Song signed the visitor log, and they walked down the fluorescent hallway toward room 14. Wade was in his chair by the window, same as always. But today he was holding something, a photograph, yellowed with age, of a woman in a summer dress standing next to a fence. "Dad," Colt said softly. Wade looked up, and for a moment there was nothing in his eyes. Then something clicked, like a lock turning in an old door. "Colt, you came. I brought someone to meet you. This is Dr. Song. She's here to talk to you." Wade studied Dr. Song with the careful suspicion of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "You a real doctor or one of those brain doctors who asks how you feel about your childhood?" Dr. Song smiled. "The second kind. And I'm very interested in how you feel, but not necessarily about your childhood." "Good. My childhood was fine. It's the present that's giving me trouble." Wade set the photograph down on the windowsill. "That's my wife, Evelyn. She died." He stopped, his face working through the effort of calculation. "She died a long time ago. I know that. Sometimes I forget, but right now I remember." "May I sit down?" Dr. Song asked. "Free country." She pulled a chair over and sat across from Wade, her posture open and relaxed. Colt stayed by the door, trying to make himself invisible. "Mr. Reiner, I'm here because your son is concerned about you. He thinks you might not be happy here." "I'm not. Can you tell me why?" Wade looked around the room, at the institutional furniture, the call button by the bed, the bathroom with its safety rails. "It's not home. The food tastes like cardboard. The people are nice enough, but they treat me like I'm made of glass, and He paused, his hands tightening on the armrests. "I know why I'm here. I know I did something. started a fire, or forgot to turn something off, or the details get fuzzy. But I know I scared people. I scared Claire. And this is what happens when you scare people. They put you somewhere safe. Is that what this feels like to you? Safety? This feels like a waiting room. Like I'm waiting to die and everyone's too polite to say so. Dr. Song made a note in her journal. If you could leave here, where would you want to go? Home. My house. The place I've lived for 40 years. Wade's voice strengthened. I want to sit on my porch. I want to make my own coffee, even if I forget and burn the pot. I want to go to bed in my own bed and wake up in a place that feels like mine. Even if it's not as safe? Safety. Wade almost spat the word. Everyone's so worried about keeping me safe they forget I'm still alive. You know what's not safe? Getting on a horse for the first time. Getting married. Having kids. Building a life. I did all those things, and yeah, sometimes I got hurt. But I was living. What I'm doing here, this isn't living. This is just not dying. Dr. Song was quiet for a long moment, and Colt could see her watching Wade with an intensity that suggested she was seeing more than just an old man in a chair. Mr. Rayner, I'm going to ask you some questions. Some of them might seem strange or too simple, but I need you to answer them as honestly as you can. Can you do that? I can try. For the next 40 minutes, Dr. Song conducted what she called a cognitive assessment. She asked Wade about dates and places, tested his memory with lists of words, had him solve simple math problems. Wade struggled with some of it. He couldn't remember what year it was, kept getting stuck on whether his own birthday was in June or July. But he never got frustrated. He just kept trying, his face set with determination. Then Dr. Song shifted gears. Mr. Reiner, if you went home, who would take care of you? Colt says he will. And do you trust him to do that? Wade looked over at his son, and Colt felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. He's my boy, Wade said slowly. He made mistakes. He ran when he should have stayed, but he came back. That counts for something. What if the care gets to be too much? What if you need more help than he can provide? Then we'll figure it out. That's what people do. They figure it out. What if you get hurt at home? What if there's another fire? Then I get hurt. Then there's a fire. Wade's hands were shaking now, but his voice stayed steady. I'm 81 years old. I've lived through things that would break most people. I survived a war. I survived losing the woman I loved. I survived watching my mind start to go. I don't need to be protected from life, doctor. I need to live what's left of it on my own terms. Dr. Song set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. That's a good answer, Mr. Rayner. Is that what this is? A test? Everything's a test when you reach a certain age. She stood up, collecting her papers. I'm going to step out for a moment. Your son will stay with you. She nodded to Colt and walked into the hallway. Colt followed, leaving Wade in his chair by the window. Out in the hall, Dr. Song leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Well? Colt asked. Your father is remarkable. Is that a medical opinion? It's a human one. She opened her eyes. Medically speaking, yes, he has significant cognitive impairment. His short-term memory is severely compromised. He has difficulty with temporal orientation and executive function, but he also has extended periods of lucidity. He understands his condition. He can articulate his wishes. And most importantly, he can explain his reasoning in a way that demonstrates genuine decision-making capacity. Colt felt something loosen in his chest. So he can come home? I didn't say that. I said he has capacity. What happens next depends on a judge, on your sister, on a dozen other factors that have nothing to do with medicine. Dr. Song pulled out her phone. But I'll write a report supporting his right to make this choice. I'll testify if necessary. And I'll do everything I can to make sure his voice is heard. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. She checked her watch. I need to drive back to Austin tonight, but I'll have the report ready by Wednesday. Mara has my contact information. Use it if you need to. She walked away down the hall, her footsteps echoing on the linoleum, and Colt stood there feeling like he'd just won a battle in a war that was far from over. When he went back into the room, Wade was staring at the photograph of Evelyn again. That doctor, Wade said without looking up. She seems smart. She is. Did I pass? You did great, Dad. Good. Wade set the photo down carefully. When do I get to go home? Soon. I hope. That's what everyone says. Soon. Later. We'll see. Wade's voice was tired. I'm running out of time, Colt. Can feel it. Things slipping away. I need to go home before I forget why it matters. Colt knelt beside his father's chair, his bad knee screaming in protest. I'm going to make it happen, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, Wade repeated. That's a dangerous promise. It's the only one I've got. Wade reached out and put his hand on Colt's shoulder, and for just a moment, he was the father Colt remembered. Strong, certain, solid as bedrock. Then keep it, Wade said. News of Dr. Song's evaluation spread through Coldwater faster than a brush fire in August. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Colt Rayner was planning something, and by Monday afternoon, everyone had an opinion about it. Colt was having coffee at the Broken Spoke when Jimmy Vance slid into the booth across from him, uninvited. Heard you're trying to spring your old man from the home, Jimmy said, his grin all teeth and no warmth. It's not a prison. Close enough. Either way, you're wasting your time. Claire's got the law on her side. Maybe. Definitely. Jimmy leaned back, arms spread across the back of the booth. You know what I think? I think you're doing this to make yourself feel better. Trying to be the hero you never were. I don't remember asking what you think. Free country. I can share my thoughts. Jimmy's grin widened. Besides, this is entertaining as hell. Watching you crash and burn has been the best show in town since Molly Sanders got caught sleeping with the Baptist minister. Colt set down his coffee cup carefully, fighting the urge to put his fist through Jimmy's face. You finished? Not even close. See, word is you've been cozying up to Mara again. That's interesting, real interesting. She spent 6 years getting over you, and now you're back, dragging her into your mess. What's that about? That's none of your business. Everything's my business in this town. That's how small towns work. Jimmy stood up, still grinning. Enjoy your coffee, superstar. And when this whole thing falls apart, and it will, don't say nobody warned you. He walked out, and Jess appeared at the booth with the coffee pot. Want me to poison his food next time he comes in? She asked. Tempting. Jimmy's an asshole, but he's not wrong about the town. She refilled Colt's cup. People are talking. Half think you're doing a good thing. Other half think you've lost your mind. What do you think? Jess considered the question. I think your dad's lucky to have someone who gives a damn. Most folks in this town, they just accept whatever the system tells them. You're at least trying to fight. Not sure fighting is the same as winning. Maybe not, but it's better than giving up. She walked away, and Colt sat there nursing his coffee, wondering if he was brave or just stupid. The line between the two had always been thinner than people liked to admit. His phone buzzed, a text from Mara. Meet me at your dad's house. We need to talk. The drive to Mesquite Road felt longer than it should have. When Colt pulled up, Mara's truck was already there, and she was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, wearing the expression she always wore when she was about to tell him something he didn't want to hear. What's wrong? He asked, climbing out of his truck. Claire filed an injunction. The words hit like a punch to the gut. What? She went to Judge Henley this morning, asked for a court order preventing you from removing Wade from the care center. The judge granted it. Can she do that? She just did. Mara pulled a folded document from her back pocket and handed it to him. This is a copy. Basically says if you try to take Wade out of that facility without court approval, you'll be arrested for contempt, custodial interference, and possibly kidnapping. Colt read the document, the legal language swimming in front of his eyes. We have Dr. Song's report. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for a lot, but Claire's lawyer argued that one evaluation isn't enough, that Wade needs ongoing psychiatric care, and that you're not qualified to provide it. Judge Henley agreed to hold a hearing next Friday. Until then, the injunction stands. Next Friday. That's 8 days. I know. Dad doesn't have 8 days. Every day he's in there, he loses more of himself. I know that too. Mara's voice was gentle. But if you violate this order, if you take him out of there before the hearing, you'll lose. Not just the case, everything. The judge will rule against you automatically, and Claire will get permanent guardianship. Is that what you want? Colt wanted to throw something, to hit something, to do anything except stand there feeling helpless. So what do? We prepare. We get ready for the hearing. We make our case. She took the document back from him. I talked to a lawyer, Frank Martinez. He handles family law cases in the county. He's willing to take your case. I can't afford a lawyer. He's doing it pro bono. Apparently he's got a thing about patient rights and he thinks you might actually win. Mara's expression softened slightly. This isn't over, Colt. It's just harder than we thought. Everything's harder than I think. That's because you don't think. You just act. But there was no bite in her words this time. Look, I know this feels impossible, but you've got Dr. Song's report, you've got a lawyer, and you've got me. That's more than you had a week ago. Why are you doing this? The question came out before Colt could stop it. You said you were doing it for Dad, but it's more than that. You could have just walked away. Mara was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the overgrown yard. You remember the summer after high school, when my dad kicked me out and I didn't have anywhere to go? You stayed here, with us. Your dad didn't even hesitate, just set up the spare room, told me I could stay as long as I needed. He never made me feel like a burden, never asked for anything in return. She turned to look at Colt. He treated me like family when my own family didn't want me. So yeah, I'm doing this for him, but I'm also doing it because someone should. Because if we just let the system grind people up and spit them out without fighting back, then what's the point of any of it? Colt wanted to reach for her, to close the distance that had grown between them over the years. But he didn't. Some gaps were too wide to cross with a single gesture. Thank you, he said instead. Save it for after the hearing. If we win. When we win. You always were an optimist. Mara walked toward her truck, then stopped. Frank wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at his office on Main Street. Don't be late. I won't. She drove away, leaving Colt standing in front of his father's house with the injunction burning a hole in his pocket and 8 days stretched out in front of him like an eternity. Frank Martinez's office was above the hardware store, accessed by a narrow staircase that tested the limits of Colt's bad knee. The office itself was small but organized, with law books lining the walls and a desk covered in neat stacks of papers. Frank himself was in his 40s, with the stocky build of someone who'd played football in college and the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned to spot bullshit from a mile away. Colt Rayner, he said, standing to shake hands. Sit down. Coffee? I'm good. Suit yourself. Frank sat back down and pulled out a file. I've read Dr. Song's report. It's thorough, well-documented, and honestly one of the best capacity evaluations I've seen. If we were arguing this case in a major city with a progressive judge, I'd say we had a 90% chance of winning. But we're not in a major city. No, we're not. We're in Coldwater, where Judge Henley has been on the bench for 20 years and doesn't like to rock the boat. He's conservative, cautious, and very concerned with liability. If your father goes home and something bad happens, the judge knows people will blame him for allowing it. So we're screwed. Not screwed, just facing an uphill battle. Frank opened the file. Here's what we need to prove at the hearing. 1, that your father has the capacity to make informed decisions about his care. 2, that you can provide a safe environment for him. 3, that his quality of life will be better at home than in the care facility. And 4, this is the hard one, that you're doing this for the right reasons. What does that mean? It means the court needs to believe you're not doing this out of guilt or spite toward your sister or some misguided attempt to relive your glory days as the local hero. Frank's eyes were steady. Are you doing this for the right reasons? Colt thought about his father sitting in that chair by the window, asking to go home. He thought about Wade's hands shaking as he tried to remember things that kept slipping away. He thought about the fear in his father's eyes when he couldn't recognize his own son. I'm doing this because he asked me to, Colt said, and because nobody else is listening. Frank nodded slowly. That's a good answer. Try to remember it when you're on the stand. He closed the file. Now let's talk about the practical stuff. If we win, and that's a big if, where exactly is your father going to live? His house, which needs modifications. Safety rails in the bathroom, non-slip flooring, a monitored alarm system in case he wanders, an emergency response button. All of that costs money. How much money? 5,000, minimum. Maybe more. Colt felt his stomach drop. I don't have $5,000. Then we need to find it. The court won't release Wade into an unsafe environment. Frank made a note. What about care? Your father can't be left alone. You'll need either round-the-clock supervision or a professional caregiver coming in multiple times a day. I'll do it. You can't do it alone. You'll need help. Then I'll find help. With what money? Frank's voice wasn't cruel, just practical. Look, I believe in what you're trying to do, but belief doesn't pay for medical equipment or caregiver salaries. We need a real plan, with real numbers, or Judge Henley will laugh us out of court. Colt stared at the wall, at the law books that contained all the rules for how to live your life when everything was falling apart. What if I got the money? He asked. How? Does it matter? Frank studied him for a long moment. As your lawyer, I have to advise you not to do anything illegal. And as a person? As a person, I'd say do whatever you have to do, but make sure it's worth it. Frank stood up. We've got 8 days until the hearing. I need a detailed care plan, proof of funds for the home modifications, and at least one character witness who can testify that you're not a complete disaster. Can you do that? I can try. Trying isn't good enough. The other side is going to come at you hard. Claire's lawyer will paint you as an irresponsible drifter who abandoned his family and only came back to ease his guilty conscience. They'll bring up every mistake you ever made, every failed relationship, every unpaid bill, every time you chose the road over your responsibilities. Are you ready for that? Colt thought about all the ways he'd failed, all the people he'd let down, all the promises he'd broken. It was a long list. I'm ready, he said. Good. Because if you're not, we're dead before we start. Frank walked him to the door. One more thing. Your sister, Claire. She's going to testify against you. Are you prepared for that? We're not exactly close. I'm not talking about being close. I'm talking about sitting in a courtroom and listening to your own family member explain to a judge why you're not fit to take care of your father. That's hard, even when you see it coming. I'll manage. I hope you're right. Frank opened the door. Stay out of trouble. Don't give them any ammunition. And for the love of everything, don't try to see your father before the hearing. The injunction is clear. If you violate it, we lose. Colt walked down the narrow staircase, each step sending pain shooting through his knee, and wondered how he was going to come up with $5,000 when he barely had 50 to his name. The answer came to him somewhere between the hardware store and his truck, and it was so obvious he wanted to laugh or cry or both. He was going to ride again. The Sandstone Rodeo was held every year in early November, just 2 counties over. It wasn't one of the big shows, not like Cheyenne or Houston or Vegas, but the prize money was decent if you placed, and the competition wasn't as fierce. Colt had ridden there 6 times when he was younger, back when his body still worked and his confidence hadn't been shattered by too many losses. He sat in his truck in front of Hank Sullivan's ranch, watching the sun set over the pastures, trying to talk himself into what he was about to do. It was stupid. He knew that. His knee was shot, his shoulder was worse, and he hadn't been on a bull in 3 years. The last time he'd tried, he'd made it 4 seconds before getting thrown into the boards hard enough to crack 2 ribs and fracture his collarbone. The doctors had told him he was done. His body had agreed. But $5,000 was $5,000, and he didn't have any other options. He got out of the truck and walked up to Hank's front door, each step a reminder of why this was a terrible idea. Hank answered on the second knock, looking unsurprised to see him. Figured you'd show up eventually, the old man said. Come on in. The house smelled like coffee and leather and decades of accumulated living. Hank led him to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking if Colt wanted any. You're here about the rodeo, Hank said. How'd you know? Because I know that look. Seen it in the mirror plenty of times. Hank sat down at the table, gesturing for Colt to do the same. Man gets desperate. He starts thinking about the one thing he knows how to do, even if it's the thing that broke him in the first place. I need the money. I know you do. Question is, are you willing to die for it? I'm not going to die. Maybe not. But you're not going to walk away clean either. Hank took a sip of coffee. You know what it takes to ride bulls? Real riding, not the stuff kids do at county fairs. It takes a body that's 20 years old, a mind that's 30, and a complete disregard for your own mortality. You're 38, broken in all the wrong places, and you've seen what happens when things go bad. That's not a recipe for success. I've got 8 seconds to stay on. I've done harder things. Have you? Hank's eyes were sharp. Because, from where I sit, you've spent the last few years running away from hard things. Now you want to run toward one of the hardest things there is, and you're doing it for reasons that have nothing to do with glory or pride. That's dangerous. I don't have a choice. Everyone's got a choice. Question is whether you can live with the consequences. Hank set down his cup. I'll help you. You will? Didn't say I'd stop you, said I'd help you. If you're going to do this fool thing, you might as well do it right. He stood up. You remember how to tape your wrist? Yeah. Good. Because we start tomorrow. Dawn. I've got an old practice bull out back. Mechanical thing, but it'll remind your body what it used to know. We've got 6 days to get you ready. That's not enough time, but it's what we've got. Colt felt something shift in his chest. Gratitude, maybe, or relief, or just the simple knowledge that he wasn't completely alone in this. Why are you helping me? He asked. Hank walked to the window, looking out at his land, at the place he'd built with his own hands and held on to through droughts and recessions and all the things that killed most family ranches. Because sometimes you gotta fight for what matters, even when the odds are bad, he said. And because Wade Rayner was a friend of mine, and I'll be damned if I watch him fade away in some institutional room when his son's willing to risk everything to bring him home. He turned to look at Colt. Just make sure it's worth it. Because once you climb on that bull, there's no going back. I know. Do you? Really? Hank's voice was quiet. Because I've seen men die trying to prove they were still something they stopped being years ago. I don't want to see that happen to you. It won't. That's what they all say. Hank opened the door. Dawn tomorrow. Don't be late. And bring that knee brace of yours. You're going to need it. Colt drove back to his father's house as the last light faded from the sky. He went inside, turned on the lights, and looked around at the place he was fighting to bring Wade back to. It needed work. It needed money. It needed 100 things Colt didn't have. But it was home, and that had to count for something. He pulled out his phone and called Mara. What's wrong? She answered, because she always assumed something was wrong when he called. Nothing's wrong. I wanted you to know I'm going to get the money. How? Better you don't know the details. There was a long pause. Colt, what are you planning? Something stupid? Of course you are. He could hear her sighing on the other end. When? Saturday, the Sandstone Rodeo? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. You're going to ride, Mara said finally. Yeah. You're out of your mind. Probably. Your knee's shot. Your shoulder's worse. You haven't trained in 3 years. You'll get killed. Or I'll get $5,000. Colt, I know what you're going to say. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. But I've got 6 days to prepare and no other options. So unless you've got a better plan, this is what's happening. Mara was quiet for so long that Colt thought she'd hung up. Then she said, I'll be there. What? Saturday, at the rodeo. I'll be there. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath it. If you're going to do this, you're not doing it alone. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. There's a difference. She paused. Don't make me regret this more than I already do. She hung up before he could respond. Colt sat in the empty house, holding his phone, and felt the weight of what he'd set in motion. 6 days until he climbed on the back of something that could kill him. 8 days until a judge decided his father's fate. And somewhere in between those two deadlines, he'd have to figure out how to hold his life together long enough to save someone else's. The smart thing would be to give up, to accept that he'd tried and failed, to let the system do what systems do. But Colt had never been particularly smart. He'd been a bull rider, which meant he'd spent years climbing onto the backs of animals that wanted him dead, holding on for 8 seconds of pure violence, and walking away with nothing but bruises and the temporary illusion that he was invincible. He could do it one more time. He had to. Dawn came cold and unforgiving. The kind of morning that made a man question every decision that had led him to standing in a dusty corral at 5:30 with his breath fogging in the air and his knee already screaming. Hank was waiting by the mechanical bull when Colt arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee that steamed in the pre-dawn darkness. "You're late," Hank said, handing him a cup. "It's 5:30. I said dawn. Dawn was 5:15. But there was no real criticism in Hank's voice, just the dry humor of a man who'd spent his whole life getting up before the sun. "You ready for this?" Colt looked at the mechanical bull, a battered contraption that had probably been built sometime during the Reagan administration and held together with duct tape and stubbornness. It didn't look like much. Then again, neither did he. Ready as I'll ever be. That's not saying much. Hank set down his coffee and walked over to a wooden box near the fence. He pulled out a worn leather glove, a roll of athletic tape, and a rope that had seen better decades. "You remember the basics? Hold on tight. Don't let go. Try not to die." "Close enough." Hank tossed him the glove. "Put that on. Left hand. And wrap your wrist 3 times around, tight enough to support it. But not so tight you cut off circulation." Colt's fingers fumbled with the tape. It had been 3 years since he'd done this, and his hands didn't remember the pattern the way they used to. Hank watched for a moment, then stepped in and took over, wrapping Colt's wrist with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "You're out of practice," Hank said. "I know. I'm not just talking about the tape. I'm talking about everything. Your stance, your grip, your mindset. You used to ride like you had nothing to lose. Now you're riding like you've got everything to lose. That's dangerous. What's the alternative? Find a different way to get the money." "There isn't one." Hank finished taping and stepped back. "Then I guess we better make sure you remember how to do this." He walked over to the mechanical bull and flipped a switch. The machine hummed to life, motors whirring. "Start slow. Just get used to the motion again. Don't try to be a hero on day 1. Colt climbed onto the bull's back, settling into the worn leather, his right hand gripping the rope. His knee protested immediately. The angle wrong, the pressure too much. He shifted his weight, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. There wasn't one. "Ready?" Hank called. "No." "Good answer." Hank hit another switch, and the bull started moving. It was gentle at first, just a slow rocking motion that Colt's body remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. Left, right, forward, back. The rhythm of it, the way his hips had to move with the motion instead of against it. It felt familiar and foreign at the same time, like speaking a language he'd once been fluent in but hadn't practiced in years. "Keep your heels down," Hank shouted. "You're riding too high. Get your center of gravity lower." Colt adjusted, dropping his weight, feeling the burn in his thighs as his muscles remembered what they used to know. The bull bucked harder. Colt held on, his left hand gripping the rope, his right arm out for balance. 3 seconds. 4. 5. The motion was getting more violent now, the mechanical bull spinning and kicking in patterns that weren't quite random. 6 seconds. 7. At 8 seconds, his knee gave out. He pitched forward, hitting the dirt face first, tasting blood and dust. "Get up," Hank said. Colt rolled onto his back, staring up at the sky that was just starting to lighten. His knee felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it. "I said get up. Give me a minute." "Bulls don't give you a minute. Neither does life." Hank appeared above him, blocking out the sky. "You've got 6 days to get ready for this. That's not enough time to waste lying in the dirt feeling sorry for yourself. So get up." Colt got up. They went again. And again. And again. Each time, Colt lasted a little longer before his body betrayed him. Each time, the landing hurt a little more. By the time the sun was fully up, he'd been thrown 11 times, and his entire body felt like one giant bruise. "That's enough for today," Hank said finally. "I can go again?" "No, you can't. You're done. If you keep pushing now, you'll injure something, and then you won't be able to ride at all." Hank turned off the mechanical bull. "Go home. Ice that knee. Take some ibuprofen. Be back here tomorrow at the same time." Colt limped to his truck, every step a negotiation between his body and his will. His body was losing. The drive back to town took forever. Every pothole sent shockwaves through his knee. Every turn made his shoulder scream. By the time he pulled up to his father's house, he could barely move. He sat in the truck for 10 minutes, gathering the strength to get out, and that's when he saw Claire's Honda pull up behind him. She got out and walked to his window, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Training." "For what?" Colt didn't answer. Claire's eyes narrowed. "You're not. Tell me you're not that stupid." "I need the money." "So get a job, work construction, do literally anything except climb on the back of an animal that wants to kill you." Her voice rose. "You're 38 years old, Colt. You're broken. You can barely walk. What makes you think you can ride?" "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice. You just keep making the wrong ones." Claire crossed her arms. "Is this really about Dad? Or is this about you trying to prove something to yourself?" "It's about getting him out of that place. That place is keeping him alive. That place is keeping him safe. What you're planning, bringing him home with no real plan, no professional care, no safety net, it's selfish, it's reckless, and it's going to get him hurt. He wants to come home. He doesn't know what he wants. That's the whole point." Claire's voice cracked. "Do you know what it's like watching him forget? Watching him look at me like I'm a stranger? I've been living with that for 2 years while you were off chasing, what? Glory? Redemption? Whatever it is you think you'll find at the bottom of a bottle or on the back of a bull? I'm trying to make it right." "You can't make it right. You can't fix the past. All you can do is stop making it worse." She turned away, then turned back. "The hearing is in 5 days. Frank Martinez is a good lawyer, but he can't win if you give the judge a reason to rule against you. And showing up to court covered in bruises from a rodeo accident is a pretty good reason." "I'll be fine." "That's what you always say, right before everything falls apart." Claire got back in her car. "I hope Dad's worth dying for, because that's what you're risking." She drove away, and Colt sat in his truck, staring at his father's house, wondering if she was right. The next 4 days were a blur of pain and repetition. Every morning, Colt showed up at Hank's ranch before dawn. Every morning, he climbed on that mechanical bull, and every morning he got thrown. But slowly, incrementally, he got better. On the second day, he lasted 12 seconds before his knee gave out. On the third day, 15 seconds. On the fourth day, he made it through a full minute of the machine's most violent patterns before finally losing his grip and hitting the dirt. "You're remembering," Hank said, helping him up. "Doesn't feel like remembering, feels like dying slowly." "That's what remembering feels like when you're our age." Hank handed him a water bottle. "You're getting your timing back, your balance is better, but you're still riding scared." "I'm not scared." "The hell you're not. I can see it every time you climb on. You're anticipating the fall instead of focusing on the ride." Hank sat down on an overturned bucket, his old knees creaking. "You know what separates good riders from dead riders? The good ones ride like they're already thrown. They accept the fall before it happens, so when it does, they're ready for it. You're trying to prevent something that's inevitable. That's a losing strategy." "How do I stop being scared?" "You don't. You ride anyway." Hank looked up at the sky, at the clouds moving overhead. "Fear's not the enemy. Fear's the thing that keeps you honest. It's when you stop being scared that you get careless, and careless gets you killed." On the fifth day, the day before the rodeo, Hank changed the routine. "No mechanical bull today," he said when Colt arrived. "Why not?" "Because you need to rest. You need to let your body recover, and you need to get your head right." Hank led him to the barn, where 3 horses stood in stalls, calm and patient. "Ever ride a bronc?" "A few times. Never competed." "Good. Because broncs are easier than bulls, and right now you need an easy win." Hank saddled one of the horses, a gray mare with intelligent eyes. "This is Stella. She's gentle as they come, but she'll buck if I ask her to. Not hard. Just enough to remind you what it feels like to stay on something that doesn't want you there." Colt climbed onto Stella's back, settling into the saddle. It felt different from the mechanical bull, warmer, more alive, less predictable. "Ready?" Hank asked. "Yeah." Hank made a clicking sound and Stella started moving. Just a walk at first, then a trot. Then Hank made another sound, something between a whistle and a shout, and Stella kicked. It wasn't violent, just a little hop, but Colt's body reacted on instinct. His knees gripped, his core tightened, his hand found the saddle horn, and he stayed on. Stella kicked again, a little harder this time. Colt moved with it, his body remembering the rhythm, the dance between rider and animal that was part cooperation and part combat. "Good," Hank called out. "Stay loose. Don't fight her. Just ride." They went around the corral 3 times, Stella bucking periodically, Colt holding on, and by the end of it, he was breathing hard, but he was still in the saddle. "How'd that feel?" Hank asked when they stopped. "Good. Better than the mechanical bull." "That's because she's alive. Machines are predictable. Animals aren't. And bulls are the least predictable of all." Hank helped him down. "The bull you drew tomorrow, you know anything about it?" "No, haven't even checked the roster." "Then let's check it now." They went into Hank's house, and Hank pulled up the Sandstone Rodeo website on a computer that was only slightly newer than the mechanical bull. He navigated to the bull roster with the careful precision of someone who'd learned technology late in life and didn't trust it. "Here," Hank said, pointing at the screen. "Open division, bull riding. What's your entry number?" Colt pulled out the confirmation email he'd printed at the library. 47. Hank scrolled down the list. 47. Colt Rayner. He kept scrolling. "Your draw is Hell." "What?" "You drew Undertaker." The name hit Colt like a fist. Undertaker was a legend in the regional circuit, a massive black bull with a reputation for ending careers. He'd been retired for a few years after putting 2 riders in the hospital, but apparently someone had brought him back for this year's competition. "How bad is he?" Colt asked, though he already knew the answer. "Bad. Real bad. He doesn't just throw riders. He goes after them. Last guy who rode him made it 6 seconds before getting launched into the boards. Broke his collarbone, cracked 3 ribs, and swore he'd never ride again." Hank closed the browser. "You need to scratch. Draw a different bull." "Can't. Entry fee's non-refundable, and the draw's final." "Then don't ride at all. Take the loss on the entry fee. It's cheaper than a hospital bill." "I need the prize money." "Not if you're dead." Hank's voice was sharp. "Undertaker's not like the bulls you used to ride. He's smart, he's mean, and he's still got something to prove. Riding him in your condition is suicide." "Then I guess I better make it count." Hank stared at him for a long moment, and Colt saw something in the old man's face that looked like resignation, or maybe respect, or maybe just sadness. "All right," Hank said finally. "If you're doing this, we're doing it right. Forget everything I taught you this week. Undertaker doesn't follow patterns. He doesn't give you time to adjust. He comes out hard and fast, and the only way to stay on is to be harder and faster." "How?" "You ride aggressive. You anticipate his moves before he makes them. You stay tight, keep your weight forward, and whatever you do, don't let him get under you. If he gets under you, you're done." They spent the rest of the afternoon going over strategy, watching old footage of Undertaker's previous rides on YouTube, analyzing every twist and kick and spin. By the time the sun started to set, Colt's head was swimming with information, and his stomach was churning with something that felt a lot like fear. "Get some sleep tonight," Hank said as Colt was leaving. "Don't drink. Don't do anything stupid. Just rest." "I will." "And Colt?" Hank's voice stopped him at the door. "Whatever happens tomorrow, whether you ride the full 8 or get thrown in 2 seconds, you're a hell of a lot braver than most people. Remember that." Colt drove back to his father's house. As the last light faded from the sky, he wanted to go see Wade, wanted to tell him what he was about to do, wanted some kind of blessing or approval or just acknowledgement that this insane plan might actually work. But the injunction was clear, and he couldn't risk violating it. Not now, not when they were this close to the hearing. So instead, he sat alone in the empty house, icing his knee and taping his wrist, and trying not to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. His phone buzzed, a text from Mara. "Still planning to do this?" He typed back, "Yeah." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Then I'll see you there. Don't die." "I'll try. That's what I'm afraid of." He set the phone down and closed his eyes, and somewhere in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw himself climbing onto Undertaker's back, saw the gate bursting open, saw 8 seconds stretching out like an eternity. He fell asleep in the chair, and he dreamed of bulls and fathers and all the things he'd left behind. The Sandstone Rodeo grounds looked exactly like Colt remembered. Same dusty parking lot, same weathered grandstands, same smell of livestock and funnel cakes and nervous sweat. It was 10 in the morning, and the place was already filling up with cowboys and families and people who'd come to watch other people risk their lives for prize money and bragging rights. Colt parked his truck in the far lot and sat there for a moment, watching the organized chaos through his windshield. His knee was throbbing despite the brace and the ibuprofen. His shoulder felt like broken glass grinding against itself. And his hands were shaking just enough that he had to grip the steering wheel to make them stop. Someone knocked on his window. Mara stood there, wearing jeans and boots and a jacket that said Chen Construction on the back. Her face was tight with worry. Colt got out of the truck. "You look terrible," she said. "Thanks. I'm serious. You look like you've been in a fight and lost." She reached out like she was going to touch his face, then pulled her hand back. "Are you sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Won't be the stupidest thing I do today." Mara almost smiled at that. Almost. "I brought a first aid kit. It's in my truck, because I'm assuming you're going to need it." "Appreciate the optimism." "It's not optimism. It's realism." She looked past him, toward the arena. "When do you ride?" "Bull riding's the last event, probably around 4. So we've got 6 hours to talk you out of this." "Not going to work." "I know, but I had to try." She started walking toward the registration tent, and Colt followed, his limp more pronounced than usual. "Have you eaten?" "Not hungry." "Eat anyway. You're going to need the energy." They got food from a vendor, barbecue that was probably decent but tasted like cardboard in Colt's mouth. They sat in the grandstands watching the early events, calf roping, barrel racing, steer wrestling. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena, making jokes that the crowd laughed at, building excitement for the main events later. "I used to love this," Mara said, watching a barrel racer make a perfect turn. "When we were kids, you remember? We'd come here every year, sit in these exact seats, eat too much junk food, and cheer for people we didn't know." "I remember." "You were different back then, fearless, like you actually believed nothing bad could happen to you." "I was stupid." "You were young. There's a difference." She turned to look at him. "What happened to that kid?" "He got older, got hurt, got tired of losing." "Is that what you think you've been doing? Losing?" "Haven't been winning much." "Winning isn't the only thing that matters." Mara's voice was quiet. "You came back. You're fighting for your dad. That counts for something." "Does it?" "Yeah, it does." She stood up. "Come on. You need to check in at the registration tent. Get your number. All that official stuff." The registration tent was chaos. Riders signing waivers, collecting their numbers, arguing with officials about draw assignments. Colt found his name on the roster, signed the waiver that basically said if he died, it wasn't anyone's fault but his own, and collected his number, 47. "Undertaker," the registration clerk said, not looking up from her clipboard. "You drew Undertaker. Good luck with that." "Thanks." "No, seriously. Good luck. He's a mean son of a bitch." Now she looked up, saw Colt's face, saw the lines and scars, and the way he was favoring his left leg. "Hey, you used to ride, didn't you? Years ago?" "Yeah." "Thought so. You were good. What happened?" "Life." "Yeah." She stamped his paperwork. "Well, welcome back. Try not to die out there." The afternoon crawled by. Colt watched the other events, trying to stay loose, trying to keep his mind from spiraling into all the catastrophic possibilities. At 3:30, the bull riders started gathering behind the chutes, a collection of young cowboys and old veterans, all of them wearing the same expression of nervous determination. Hank found him at 3:45. "You ready?" the old man asked. "No?" "Good. That means you're paying attention." Hank handed him a small container of rosin. "For your rope. And here," he pulled out a mouthguard. "Wear this. I don't care if it makes you look stupid. Better to look stupid than lose your teeth." Colt took the mouthguard, turned it over in his hands. "Thanks for everything. For training me. For believing this wasn't completely insane." "I never said it wasn't insane. I just said I'd help." Hank gripped his shoulder, careful of the bad one. "You remember what I told you about Undertaker? Stay tight. Keep my weight forward. Don't let him get under me. And ride like I'm already thrown." "That's right. Except the fall. Then maybe you won't have one." Hank stepped back. I'll be watching from the stands. And Colt? Whatever happens, you've got more heart than sense, and that's a rare thing. The bull riders were called to the chutes. Colt made his way through the crowd, his number pinned to his back, his heart hammering in his chest. The chutes were behind the arena, a series of metal pens where the bulls waited, massive and impatient and utterly indifferent to the humans who were about to try to ride them. Undertaker was in chute 7. Colt saw him before he saw anything else. A black mountain of muscle and fury, easily 2,000 pounds, with horns that curved up like weapons and eyes that looked almost intelligent in their malevolence. The bull shifted in the chute, and the entire structure shook. "Hell of a draw," someone said beside him. Colt turned to see a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, with a baby face and the kind of confidence that came from not knowing any better. "You ever ride him?" the kid asked. "No. Me neither. But I heard stories. They say he's got a memory, goes after riders he doesn't like." "Great." "Yeah." The kid grinned, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. "Good luck, man." The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the main event of the evening, bull riding. These cowboys will attempt to stay on the back of 2,000 pounds of fury for 8 seconds, not 8 minutes, not 8 hours, 8 seconds. That's all it takes to separate the champions from from everyone else." The crowd roared. The first rider was up. A kid from somewhere in Oklahoma riding a bull called Tornado. He lasted 4 seconds before getting thrown sideways into the dirt. The crowd cheered. The bullfighters rushed in to distract the bull while the rider scrambled to safety. Second rider, 5 seconds. Third rider, 7 seconds. So close. The crowd groaned in sympathy. Fourth rider, 3 seconds and a hard landing that looked like it hurt. They went through the roster. Some riders made 8 seconds and pumped their fists in triumph. Most didn't. The dirt in the arena churned into dust. The air smelled like animal and adrenaline and fear. "Number 47, the announcer called. "Colt Rayner riding Undertaker." Colt walked to chute 7, and the world narrowed down to this: metal rails, dusty air, and a black bull that seemed to fill all the space in the universe. Mara appeared at the chute rail. "Colt." He looked at her. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We'll find another way." "There isn't another way." "Then be careful, please." "I will." "That's not good enough." Her voice cracked. I can't watch you die. Not for this. Not for anything. I'm not going to die." "You don't know that." "No, but I know I have to try." He reached through the rails and touched her hand just for a moment. "If I don't make it, don't. If I don't make it, make sure Dad knows I tried. Tell him yourself." Mara's eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. "After you ride the full 8 and win the money and prove to everyone that you're the most stubborn son of a bitch in Texas." Colt climbed onto the chute rail and lowered himself onto Undertaker's back. The bull shifted beneath him, all muscle and malice. Colt could feel the heat coming off the animal's hide, could feel the tension coiled in every inch of that massive body. This wasn't like the mechanical bull. This wasn't even like Stella. This was something primordial and powerful and completely beyond his control. He wrapped the rope around his left hand, testing the tension. His hands were shaking, his knee was screaming. His shoulder felt like it might separate completely if he put any weight on it. He looked up at the stands and found Mara's face in the crowd. Found Hank sitting next to her, found 100 strangers who'd come to watch him succeed or fail, and who probably didn't care which. "Ready?" the chute operator asked. Colt nodded. "Good luck." The gate burst open, and Undertaker exploded into the arena like a thunderstorm given flesh. The first second was chaos. Undertaker didn't just buck. He launched himself into the air like he was trying to break gravity itself, twisting his massive body sideways while his back legs kicked at the sky. Colt felt his spine compress, felt his teeth slam together despite the mouthguard, felt every injury he'd ever sustained light up like a roadmap of pain. But he held on. His left hand gripped the rope so hard he could feel the fibers cutting into his palm, even through the glove. His right arm shot out for balance, and his core tightened, every muscle in his body working to keep him centered on the bull's back. His knees screamed, but he couldn't think about that. Couldn't think about anything except the rhythm, the dance, the 8 seconds that felt like 8 hours. 2 seconds. Undertaker came down hard, all 4 hooves hitting the dirt at once, and the impact rattled Colt's bones. Before he could adjust, the bull spun left, a violent rotation that would have thrown a less experienced rider immediately. But Colt's body remembered this move from the mechanical bull, from Hank's training, from 1,000 rides in another lifetime. He leaned into the spin, letting his hips move with it instead of fighting it. 3 seconds. The crowd was roaring, but Colt couldn't hear them. All he could hear was his own breathing, harsh and fast through his nose, and the grunts of the bull beneath him. Angry, primal sounds that suggested Undertaker knew exactly what he was doing and wasn't happy about the human still attached to his back. 4 seconds. Undertaker tried something new. A sharp kick followed immediately by a forward lunge, trying to get his head down and his back end up, trying to create the angle that would send Colt flying over his horns. Colt saw it coming half a second before it happened, and he shifted his weight forward, pressing down with his thighs, refusing to give the bull the leverage he needed. "That's it," someone shouted from near the chutes. Might have been Hank. Might have been anyone. "Stay on him!" 5 seconds. Colt's left hand was going numb. The rope was cutting off circulation, and he could feel his grip starting to weaken. His shoulder was on fire, the old injury flaring up, threatening to give out completely. And his knee felt like someone was driving hot nails through the joint with every movement. But he held on. 6 seconds. Undertaker went into a spin, faster this time, more aggressive. The arena blurred around Colt, grandstands, faces, sky, all bleeding together into a smear of motion and color. His equilibrium went sideways. For a moment he couldn't tell which way was up. The bull was under him and beside him and everywhere at once. "Stay tight," Hank's voice echoed in his head. "Keep your weight forward. Don't let him get under you." Colt pulled himself back to center, found his balance, held on. 7 seconds. The longest second of his life. Undertaker seemed to realize that the usual tricks weren't working, and he did something Colt hadn't anticipated. He stopped moving completely. Just froze in place, all that muscle locked and tense. And for a fraction of a second, Colt thought maybe the bull had given up. Maybe he'd actually... Undertaker exploded. It wasn't a buck or a spin or a kick. It was all of them at once, a violent combination that had no pattern and no mercy. The bull twisted in midair, his back end going one direction and his front end going another, and Colt felt his grip slip. The buzzer sounded. 8 seconds. But Colt was already flying. He left Undertaker's back in a trajectory that was more vertical than horizontal, his body spinning through empty air. For a moment, just a moment, he was weightless, suspended between the ride and the fall, between triumph and disaster. Then gravity reasserted itself. Colt hit the ground hard, shoulder first, and heard something crack. Pain exploded through his entire body, white-hot and all-consuming. He tried to roll, tried to get away from the bull's hooves, but his body wouldn't respond. Everything was pain and dust and the sound of his own harsh breathing. "Get up!" someone screamed. "Move!" But Colt couldn't move. He could barely think through the agony radiating from his shoulder and his ribs and his knee and everywhere else. Undertaker turned. Through the haze of pain, Colt saw the bull coming back toward him, saw those massive horns lowering, saw 2,000 pounds of fury bearing down on him with what looked like deliberate intent. The stories were true. Undertaker had a memory, and he didn't forget riders who'd managed to stay on his back. The bullfighters rushed in, waving their arms, shouting, trying to distract the bull. One of them, a wiry guy with reflexes like a cat, got between Colt and Undertaker, slapping the bull's face, drawing his attention away. "Get him out!" the bullfighter yelled. Hands grabbed Colt under his arms, dragging him toward the rails. His shoulders screamed, his vision blurred. But he was moving, being pulled to safety by people whose faces he couldn't see. They got him behind the chutes just as Undertaker charged the bullfighter, who dodged at the last second with the kind of grace that came from doing this exact dance 1,000 times. The other bullfighters herded Undertaker toward the exit gate, and after a few more seconds of resistance, the bull finally allowed himself to be guided out of the arena. Colt sat on the ground behind the chutes, his back against a post, trying to remember how to breathe. His left arm hung useless at his side. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. Every breath felt like someone was stabbing him in the ribs. But he'd done it. 8 seconds. A medic appeared, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me?" "Yeah," Colt managed. "Don't move." We need to check you for injuries. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're bleeding, and I'm pretty sure you've got some broken ribs. Maybe a separated shoulder. The medic shined a light in Colt's eyes. Follow my finger. Good. Okay. Can you move your legs? Colt moved his legs. They worked, more or less. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospital. Colt tried to stand and the world tilted sideways. Hands caught him. The medic and someone else. Someone familiar. Mara. Are you out of your mind? She said, her voice shaking with what might have been anger or fear or both. You need a hospital. Can't afford a hospital. Then I'll pay for it. No. Colt finally managed to focus on her face. Did I make 8? That's what you're worried about? Whether you made 8? Did I? Yes, you idiot. You made 8. The buzzer went off right before you got thrown. Mara's eyes were red. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. That's not the point. That's the only point. Colt looked past her, toward the arena. What's my score? Did I place? The announcer's voice boomed across the grounds. Ladies and gentlemen, what a ride! Colt Rayner, coming out of retirement, just rode Undertaker for the full 8 seconds with a score of 86. That puts him in second place overall. Second place. The prize money for second place was $4,000, not $5,000. Not enough for all the home modifications Frank had said they'd need, but close. Close enough that maybe he could figure out the rest. I need to talk to the officials, Colt said, trying to stand again. You need to sit down before you pass out, Mara said. I'm fine. You're not fine. She stopped, looking at him, really looking at him. You're insane. Completely, totally insane. Probably. Definitely. But she helped him up anyway, one arm around his waist, supporting his weight. Come on, let's get you to the payout table before you bleed out or collapse or whatever else you're planning to do. They made their way through the crowd of riders and officials and spectators, Colt limping and Mara half carrying him. His shoulder was a symphony of agony, and he was pretty sure the medic was right about the broken ribs. Every breath felt like someone was dragging broken glass across his lungs. But he'd done it. Against every reasonable expectation, against his own broken body, against a bull that had ended careers, he'd done it. The payout table was set up near the registration tent, and there was already a line of riders waiting to collect their winnings. Colt got in line, swaying slightly, and Mara kept her arm around him like she was afraid he'd fall over if she let go. She was probably right. Colt. Hank appeared through the crowd, his weathered face split by a grin that made him look 20 years younger. You son of a bitch, you actually did it. 86, that's a hell of a score. Not high enough. High enough to beat 90% of the riders here. High enough to earn some respect. Hank looked him over, the grin fading. You're hurt. I'm fine. Stop saying you're fine. You look like you went through a meat grinder. Hank turned to Mara. Get him to a doctor. I'm trying. Trying's not good enough. Hank stepped closer, his voice dropping. Listen to me, son. You proved whatever you needed to prove. You rode your ride. You got your money. Now take care of yourself before you do permanent damage. After I collect. Stubborn as a damn mule. But Hank didn't argue further. He just stood there with them while the line moved forward, one rider at a time collecting their checks or cash. Finally, it was Colt's turn. The woman behind the table looked up from her spreadsheet, saw him, and winced. You're the guy who rode Undertaker. Yeah. You okay? I'm fine. Everyone keeps saying that, and nobody ever means it. She typed something into her laptop. Colt Rayner, second place, $4,000. You want a check or cash? Cash. Cash it is. She counted out bills, hundreds and fifties, all worn and real and beautiful. She put them in an envelope and handed it to him. Congratulations. And seriously, see a doctor. Colt took the envelope, felt the weight of it in his hand, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like maybe he'd done something right. They made it to Mara's truck before Colt's legs gave out completely. He collapsed against the side of the vehicle, sliding down until he was sitting on the ground, his back against the tire. The envelope of cash was clutched in his good hand, and he wasn't sure whether he wanted to laugh or cry or both. Okay, Mara said, kneeling beside him. We're going to the hospital now. No arguments. No hospital. Colt. The hearing's in 3 days. If I show up in a hospital gown with my arm in a sling, the judge will take one look at me and rule against us. I can't risk that. So what's your plan? Suffer in silence? Something like that. Mara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The kind of breath someone takes when they're trying very hard not to scream. Fine. Not the hospital, but we're going to a clinic, and you're going to let them x-ray whatever's broken, and you're going to take whatever pain medication they give you. And if they say you need surgery, you're getting surgery. Are we clear? Clear. Good. She helped him up and into the passenger seat of her truck. Every movement was agony, but Colt bit down on the mouthguard he was still wearing and didn't make a sound. The drive to the urgent care clinic took 20 minutes. Colt spent the entire ride staring at the envelope of money, doing math in his head. $4,000 wasn't enough for everything Frank had said they'd need, but it was enough for most of it. The safety rails, the alarm system, maybe some of the flooring. He could figure out the rest. He had to. The clinic was nearly empty, just a few patients waiting with various minor injuries and illnesses. Mara checked him in, and they waited in uncomfortable plastic chairs until a nurse called his name. The examination room was small and sterile and too bright. The nurse took his vitals, asked him a dozen questions about pain levels and medical history, and then left him sitting on the paper-covered table with instructions to remove his shirt. Removing his shirt was harder than riding the bull had been. His left arm wouldn't move above shoulder height, and his right side was already turning purple with bruises. By the time he got the shirt off, he was breathing hard and sweating despite the air conditioning. Mara helped him, her hands gentle, her face carefully neutral. But he saw her flinch when she saw the full extent of the damage, the bruises that covered his ribs and shoulder, the swelling around his collarbone, the cuts and scrapes that mapped the violence of the fall. "This is bad," she said quietly. "I've had worse." That's not reassuring. The doctor came in a few minutes later, a young woman with tired eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd seen it all. She examined Colt's shoulder, pressing gently, asking him to move his arm in different directions. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body. "Separated shoulder," she said finally. "Grade 2, maybe 3. You'll need to wear a sling for at least 3 weeks. The ribs. I'm going to order x-rays, but I'm fairly certain you've cracked at least 2, possibly more. We can't do much for broken ribs except manage the pain and let them heal." "How long?" 4 to 6 weeks, maybe longer depending on severity. "I don't have 4 to 6 weeks." The doctor looked at him with something that might have been sympathy or might have been exhaustion. "I don't know what to tell you. The body heals on its own schedule. You can ignore it and make things worse, or you can rest and let it recover. Those are your options." "There's always a third option." "Not in medicine, there isn't." She made notes on her tablet. "I'm going to prescribe pain medication and muscle relaxers. You'll need to ice the shoulder regularly, keep your arm immobilized, and avoid any strenuous activity. And I mean any. No lifting, no driving if you can avoid it, definitely no bull riding." "Wasn't planning on doing it again." "That's the smartest thing I've heard all day." She finished her notes. "The x-ray tech will be in shortly. After that, we'll get you wrapped up and sent home. Do you have someone who can take care of you for the next few days?" Colt looked at Mara, who was standing by the door with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said. "I've got someone." The x-rays confirmed what the doctor had suspected: separated shoulder, 3 cracked ribs, and a hairline fracture in his collarbone that had probably been there for years and was now worse. They wrapped his ribs, put his arm in a sling, gave him prescriptions for pain medications he probably couldn't afford, and sent him on his way with instructions to rest. Resting was not part of the plan. "Take me to Dad's house," Colt said as they walked to Mara's truck. "No. You need to rest, like the doctor said. I need to get ready for the hearing. 3 days isn't a lot of time." "It's plenty of time to heal a little and not look like you just went 12 rounds with a freight train." Mara opened the passenger door. "You're coming to my place. I've got a spare room, and I can keep an eye on you. Make sure you don't do anything else stupid." "Mara, this isn't a negotiation." Her voice was firm. "You just rode a bull for 8 seconds and nearly got killed. You've got a separated shoulder and broken ribs. You can barely stand up on your own. So you're coming to my place, you're going to take your medication, and you're going to rest. And if you argue with me, I will drive you to Claire's house and let her deal with you. Colt knew when he was beaten. Fine. Mara's house was a small ranch on the east side of town with a neat yard and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. She'd bought it 5 years ago with money saved from working construction, and she'd fixed it up herself. New roof, new windows, fresh paint. It was the kind of house that spoke of stability and permanence, 2 things Colt had never managed to achieve. She helped him inside and settled him on the couch in the living room, propping pillows behind him and draping a blanket over his legs like he was an invalid, which he supposed he kind of was. I'm going to pick up your prescriptions, she said, and get some food, real food, not gas station sandwiches. You're going to eat, take your medication, and sleep, in that order. Yes, ma'am. Don't yes, ma'am me. I'm serious. If I come back and you've moved from this couch, I'm calling an ambulance. She grabbed her keys. I'll be back in an hour. Don't die while I'm gone. She left, and Colt sat in the silence of her house, looking around at the life she'd built without him. Family photos on the walls, her parents, her younger brother who died in a car accident when they were teenagers, friends from over the years. A bookshelf full of construction manuals and mystery novels. A collection of coffee mugs that said things like, I survived another meeting that should have been an email. It was a good life, a normal life. The kind of life he'd walked away from because he'd thought there was something better waiting for him on the road. He'd been wrong about a lot of things. The envelope of money was still in his pocket, slightly crumpled from the fall. Colt pulled it out and counted the bills again, making sure it was real. $4,000. Not enough, but more than he'd had this morning. His phone buzzed. A text from Frank Martinez. Heard you rode today. Heard you placed. Hearing still on for Wednesday. How are you holding up? Colt typed back with his good hand. I'm fine. Got the money. Most of it anyway. 3 dots appeared. Then, good. Rest up. We need you presentable for court. And try not to do anything else that might kill you before then. No promises. That's what I was afraid of. Colt set the phone down and closed his eyes, just for a moment. Just to rest. Just to let his body stop screaming for long enough that he could think clearly. He woke up 2 hours later to the smell of chicken soup and the sound of Mara moving around in the kitchen. His shoulder had stiffened up while he slept, and the pain was worse now, a deep throbbing that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. You're awake, Mara said, appearing in the doorway with a bowl of soup and a glass of water. Here, eat this. Then take your medication. What time is it? Almost 8. You slept through the afternoon. I didn't mean to. It's fine. You needed it. She set the soup and water on the coffee table. I called Frank, told him what happened. He said to tell you that you're an idiot, but he respects your commitment. High praise. It's Frank. That's as good as it gets. She sat down in the chair across from him, watching as he tried to eat soup one-handed. So what now? Now we prepare for the hearing, go over the testimony, make sure we've got everything we need. You heard the doctor. You're supposed to rest. I'll rest after Wednesday. Colt, I can't rest, Mara, not yet. Not when we're this close. He set down the spoon, his hand shaking slightly. I've got $4,000. I need to figure out where the rest is coming from. I need to make sure Dad's house is ready. I need to talk to Frank about character witnesses and care plans and a dozen other things. I don't have time to rest. You don't have time not to rest. Mara's voice was gentle. You're no good to your father if you collapse in the courtroom. You're no good to anyone if you push yourself so hard that you end up back in the hospital. So yes, we'll prepare. We'll go over everything, but we'll do it while you're taking care of yourself. Deal? Colt wanted to argue, but he was too tired and in too much pain to fight. Deal. Good. She stood up. Finish your soup, take your medication, and then we're going to talk about the hearing. But first, you're going to do what the doctor said and take care of yourself. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and pain. Mara took time off work to help him get everything ready. They went through Frank's checklist item by item: care plan, financial documentation, home safety modifications, character witnesses. Hank agreed to testify about Colt's determination and work ethic. Dr. Song sent over her official report and confirmed she'd appear in court. Even Jess from the diner volunteered to speak about Colt's commitment to making things right. Claire, predictably, refused to talk to him. Her lawyer sent a formal letter outlining their position, That Wade was not capable of making informed decisions, that Colt was not capable of providing adequate care, and that the court should maintain the existing guardianship arrangement. On Tuesday afternoon, the day before the hearing, Colt went to see the house one last time. Mara drove him, and they walked through the rooms together, checking off items on Frank's list. The safety rails were installed in the bathroom. Colt had hired a handyman with part of the prize money. The alarm system was set up, though not yet activated. The non-slip flooring was only partially complete, but it was enough to show the judge they were serious. "It looks good," Mara said, running her hand along the new rail by the bathtub. "Better than I expected, honestly. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect, but it's good enough. It shows you care." They stood in Wade's bedroom, looking at the bed that had been made up with fresh sheets, the photos on the nightstand of Evelyn and the kids when they were young. This was what they were fighting for, not just a place, but a home, a space where Wade could be himself, could remember or forget on his own terms, could live out whatever time he had left with dignity instead of resignation. "You think we have a chance?" Colt asked. "I think we have more than a chance. I think we have a good case." Mara turned to look at him. "But Colt, you need to understand something. Even if we win, even if the judge rules in your favor, this isn't going to be easy. Taking care of someone with dementia, it's hard, it's exhausting, it's heartbreaking. You're going to watch him forget things. You're going to have the same conversation 20 times in one day. You're going to see him scared and confused and not knowing where he is. Are you ready for that?" "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." "That seems to be your answer to everything. It's worked so far." "Has it?" Mara's voice was soft. "Or have you just gotten lucky?" Colt didn't have an answer to that. They locked up the house and drove back to Mara's place as the sun set over Coldwater. Tomorrow would bring the hearing, the judge's decision, the end of this particular fight. Win or lose, everything would change. That night, Colt couldn't sleep. His shoulder throbbed despite the medication, his ribs ached with every breath, and his mind wouldn't stop running through scenarios. What he'd say on the stand, how Claire would look at him, whether Judge Henley would see him as a son trying to help his father or a drifter trying to ease his conscience. At 2 a.m, he gave up and got out of bed, moving carefully, trying not to jar his injuries. He walked to the living room and stood at the window, looking out at the quiet street, at the houses where people slept without having to worry about court hearings or separated shoulders or whether they'd done enough to save the people they loved. "Can't sleep?" Mara's voice came from behind him. He turned. She was standing in the hallway, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't. I couldn't sleep either." She walked over to the window, standing next to him. "You nervous about tomorrow?" "Terrified." "Good. That means you care." They stood in silence for a while, watching the streetlights cast shadows across the empty road. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Mara said finally, "you should know something. What you did, coming back, fighting for your dad, riding that bull even though you knew it might kill you, it matters. It might not work out the way you want. The judge might rule against you, but you tried, and that's more than most people would do. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's something." She turned to face him. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I didn't think I would be. I was so angry when you came back, so convinced you'd just make everything worse, but you proved me wrong. I'm good at proving people wrong, usually in the bad way. Maybe not this time." She reached out and touched his good arm just for a moment. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard enough without you being exhausted on top of everything else." "Mara?" "Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For believing in this when nobody else did. For helping me even though you had every reason not to. For—" He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "For being there?" she offered. "Yeah. For being there." "You're welcome." She smiled, sad and tired and real. "Now go to bed. Tomorrow we go to war." The courthouse sat on Main Street like a monument to authority, all red brick and white columns, and the kind of architecture that was meant to intimidate people into behaving. Colt stood on the steps at 8:30 in the morning, his arm in a sling, his ribs wrapped tight beneath a dress shirt Mara had bought for him the day before, and tried to remember how to breathe. Frank Martinez appeared at his elbow, carrying a briefcase that looked like it had survived several wars. "You ready?" Frank asked. "No." "Good. Honest answer." Frank adjusted his tie. "Here's how this is going to go. Judge Henley will hear opening statements from both sides. Then Claire's lawyer will present their case, probably Claire herself, maybe someone from the care center, maybe a doctor they've hired. Then we present ours. Dr. Song, Hank, whoever else we've got. Then closing statements. Then the judge makes his ruling. How long? Could be 2 hours, could be all day. Depends on how many witnesses they call and how much the judge wants to hear." Frank looked at him. "You're going to testify. You understand that, right? Claire's lawyer is going to ask you questions designed to make you look irresponsible. They're going to bring up every mistake you've ever made. They're going to ask about the bull riding, about why you left, about whether you can really take care of your father. You need to stay calm, answer honestly, and don't let them rattle you." I can do that. "I hope so, because if you lose your temper or say something stupid, we're done." Frank glanced at his watch. "Where's Mara?" "Parking the truck." "Good. We're going to need her." Frank started up the steps. "Come on, let's go save your father." The courtroom was smaller than Colt expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights, and the seal of Texas mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench. Claire was already there, sitting on the left side with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with glasses and an expression that suggested she didn't lose often. Claire didn't look at Colt as he walked in, just stared straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. Mara slid into the bench behind Colt, just as the bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Henley entered from a side door, and Colt's first thought was that the man looked exactly like what you'd expect from a small-town Texas judge. Late 60s, white hair, a face that had spent decades making decisions that affected other people's lives. He settled into his chair with the careful movements of someone whose back hurt, adjusted his reading glasses, and opened a folder. "We're here today for a guardianship hearing," Judge Henley said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from 30 years on the bench. "The matter of Wade Rayner. Ms. Brennan, you're representing Claire Rayner, the current guardian?" Claire's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Martinez, you're representing Colt Rayner, who's challenging the guardianship arrangement?" Frank stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "All right, let's proceed. Ms. Brennan, your opening statement." Claire's lawyer, Ms. Brennan, walked to the center of the courtroom with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Wade Rayner is 81 years old with advanced dementia. He requires round-the-clock supervision, medication management, and professional care. Claire Rayner has provided that care through a licensed facility where Wade is safe, healthy, and monitored by medical professionals. Colt Rayner, who abandoned his father for 3 years, has suddenly returned and wants to remove Wade from this safe environment based on," she paused, consulting her notes, "sentiment and guilt. The evidence will show that Colt lacks the resources, the stability, and the capability to provide adequate care. We ask that the court maintain the existing guardianship arrangement in Wade's best interest." She sat down, and Colt felt the weight of those words settle over the courtroom like a verdict already rendered. Frank stood, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, this case is about autonomy and dignity. Wade Rayner is not a vegetable. He's not comatose. He has periods of lucidity. He can express his wishes, and what he wishes, consistently and clearly, is to go home. Not to an institution. Home. To the place he's lived for 40 years. To die in his own bed instead of a care facility bed. Colt Rayner came back not out of guilt, but out of love, and a recognition that his father deserves better than being warehoused. The evidence will show that Colt has a concrete plan, the financial means, and the determination to provide Wade with quality care in his own home. We ask that the court respect Wade's wishes and grant Colt guardianship." Frank sat down, and Judge Henley made a note in his folder. "Ms. Brennan, call your first witness." The petitioner calls Claire Rayner to the stand. Claire walked to the witness box, was sworn in, and sat down with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked tired, Colt realized, tired and older than her 36 years. "Ms. Rayner," Brennan began, "how long have you been your father's primary caregiver?" 3 years, since the symptoms started getting worse. And can you describe those symptoms? Memory loss, confusion, forgetting where he was, what day it was, who people were. He'd have good days where he seemed almost normal, but the bad days got worse and more frequent. Claire's voice was steady, clinical. 2 years ago, he got lost driving to the grocery store, ended up 30 miles away before a police officer found him and brought him home. Last year, he left the stove on overnight, and then the fire. That was the final straw. The fire that led to his placement in the care facility. Yes, he tried to make coffee, forgot the pot, and nearly burned the house down. Mrs. Henderson saw the smoke and called 911. When I got there, Dad was standing in the kitchen, confused and scared, holding a fire extinguisher he didn't know how to use. Claire's voice cracked slightly. I realized then that I couldn't keep him safe at home anymore, so I made the hardest decision of my life and moved him to Coldwater Care Center. And how has he done there? He's stable, clean, fed, safe. The staff knows how to work with dementia patients. They manage his medications. They have protocols for when he gets confused or agitated. He's in the best place he could be. During this entire time, where was your brother? I don't know. He was gone. He left 3 years ago and didn't come back. Didn't call, didn't write, just disappeared. And now he wants to take your father out of a safe facility? Objection, Frank said, leading. Sustained, Judge Henley said. Rephrase, Monsieur Chialbas. Brennan, what is your opinion of your brother's plan? I think it's reckless. I think he's doing this to ease his own guilt, not because it's what's best for Dad. He doesn't have experience with dementia care. He doesn't have a medical background. He just rode a bull 4 days ago and separated his shoulder. How is he supposed to take care of someone who can't take care of himself when he can barely take care of himself? Thank you. No further questions. Frank stood for cross-examination. Miss Rayner, you testified that your father has good days and bad days. On the good days, is he capable of expressing his wishes? Sometimes. Does he ever say he wants to go home? Claire hesitated. Yes. How often? I don't keep track. But it's frequent, isn't it? He asks to go home regularly. A lot of dementia patients ask for familiar things. It doesn't mean they understand what they're asking for. So you've decided that your father doesn't know what he wants. I've decided that I need to keep him safe. Even if it makes him miserable? Objection, Brennan said. Argumentative. Sustained. Frank changed tactics. You testified that your brother abandoned the family. But isn't it true that you told him to leave? That you told him there was nothing he could do? That's not... Yes or no, Ms. Rayner, did you tell Colt to leave? I told him he couldn't help. That's different from telling him to go. But the effect was the same, wasn't it? He left, believing his presence wasn't wanted or needed. Frank paused. And now that he's come back, now that he's willing to take responsibility, you're fighting him. Why? Because I don't trust him. He's proven he can't be relied on. Or maybe you're angry. Maybe you've carried this burden for so long that you can't imagine letting someone else share it, even if that someone is your own brother. Objection. Withdrawn. Frank sat down. No further questions. Claire returned to her seat, her face flushed, and Colt felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy or might have been guilt. She wasn't wrong about everything. He had left. He had been unreliable. But he was here now, and that had to count for something. Ms. Brennan called her next witness, a doctor from the care center who testified about Wade's condition, his medication regimen, the level of care required. The doctor was professional, thorough, and made it sound like removing Wade from the facility would be tantamount to signing his death warrant. Frank cross-examined, got the doctor to admit that Wade had lucid periods, that he expressed wishes about his care, that dementia didn't automatically mean total incapacity. Small victories. Then it was their turn. The defense calls Dr. Helen Song, Frank announced. Doctor. Song walked to the stand with the same calm authority she'd brought to the care center. She was sworn in, stated her credentials, 30 years as a psychiatrist specializing in dementia and geriatric care, and settled into her chair. Dr. Song, you evaluated Wade Rayner last week. What were your findings? Mr. Rayner has significant cognitive impairment consistent with moderate to advanced dementia. However, he retains capacity in several important areas. He can articulate his wishes. He understands his condition, at least in general terms. He can explain his reasoning for wanting to leave the care facility and return home. In my professional opinion, he meets the legal standard for decision-making capacity regarding his own care. In layman's terms, what does that mean? It means he's still a person with agency. He's not a child. He's not incompetent. He's an elderly man with a progressive disease who nevertheless understands what he wants and why he wants it. The law should respect that. Even if what he wants might be less safe than the alternative? Safety isn't the only consideration. Dignity, autonomy, quality of life, these matter too. If we prioritize safety above all else, we end up infantilizing people, treating them like prisoners for their own good. That's not compassionate. That's just convenient for everyone except the patient. Ms. Brennan cross-examined, tried to poke holes in Dr. Song's evaluation, suggested that one 40-minute assessment wasn't enough to determine capacity. Dr. Song remained unflappable, citing case law and medical ethics and 3 decades of experience. Frank called Hank next. The old man walked to the stand slowly, his own years showing, and was sworn in. Mr. Sullivan, how do you know Colt Rayner? Known him since he was a kid, watched him grow up, taught him to ride, and then watched him disappear for a few years before he came back last month. And what was your impression when he came back? Honestly, I thought he was running from something. That's what men like us do when we don't know what else to do. We run. But then he told me what he was planning, and I realized he wasn't running anymore. He was standing still, facing something hard. That takes a different kind of courage. You helped him train for the rodeo? I did. Watched him get on that mechanical bull every morning, get thrown, get back up, get thrown again. His knee was shot, his shoulder was worse, and he knew the odds were against him. But he kept getting back on. That's not the behavior of someone who's unreliable. That's the behavior of someone who will do whatever it takes. Thank you. No further questions. Ms. Brennan declined to cross-examine, and Hank returned to his seat with a nod to Colt. Frank called Mara. She walked to the stand, her hands steady, her face composed. But Colt could see the tension in her shoulders. Ms. Chen, how do you know the Rayner family? Wade and Evelyn took me in when I was 18 and had nowhere else to go. They treated me like family. Wade taught me how to fix things, how to run a business, how to be someone worth knowing. I owe him everything. And Colt? We were together, a long time ago. Then he left. She glanced at Colt, and he saw something in her eyes he couldn't quite name. I was angry about that for a long time, but watching him this past week, watching him fight for his father, despite knowing he might fail, despite everyone telling him he was crazy, I realized something. He's not the same person who left. He's someone who came back. Do you believe he can take care of his father? Not alone. But with help? With a community supporting him? Yes, I believe he can. And more importantly, I believe he will. Because I've seen what he's willing to do. I've seen him risk everything for someone he loves. That's more than most people can say. Thank you. Ms. Brennan stood for cross-examination. Ms. Chen, you're emotionally involved with the defendant, aren't you? I care about this family, if that's what you mean. So your testimony isn't exactly objective? No testimony is objective. We all bring our biases. But I'm telling the truth as I see it. The truth is that you're supporting someone who abandoned his family for 3 years and is now making promises he might not be able to keep. The truth is that people make mistakes, and sometimes they come back and try to fix them. We can either help them or stand in their way. I choose to help. Brennan sat down, and Mara returned to her seat. The defense calls Colt Rayner, Frank said. This was it. Colt stood, his knee protesting, his shoulder throbbing, and walked to the witness stand. He was sworn in, stated his name, and sat down. Every person in the courtroom was looking at him. Claire, the judge, the lawyers, Mara. He felt exposed, judged, found wanting before he'd said a single word. Mr. Rayner, Frank began, why did you leave Coldwater 3 years ago? Because I was chasing something, pride maybe, or the person I used to be. I thought if I could win one more championship, place at one more rodeo, I could prove I was still worth something. I was wrong. And why did you come back? Because someone told me my father was in a care facility. And when I went to see him, when I saw him sitting in that room looking out a window at nothing, asking to go home, I couldn't walk away again. Not this time. Your sister testified that you're doing this out of guilt. Is that true? Partly. Yeah, I feel guilty. I should have been here. I should have helped. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because my father looked me in the eye and asked me to take him home. And because nobody else is listening to what he wants. You rode in a rodeo last Saturday. You placed second. You won $4,000 and separated your shoulder. Why did you do that? Because I needed money for home modifications, safety equipment, things the court requires. And I didn't have any other way to get it. Was it worth it? Colt looked at his arm in the sling, thought about the pain that was currently drilling through his ribs. Yes. Why? Because some things are worth getting hurt for. Frank let that hang in the air for a moment. If the court grants you guardianship, what's your plan? Dad comes home. I move into his house, take care of him full time. I've got safety rails installed, an alarm system, non-slip flooring. I'll manage his medications, make sure he eats, stay with him when he gets confused. Mara's offered to help. So has Hank. We've got a network. Not perfect, but good enough. And when it gets harder, when he forgets who you are, when the care becomes too much, then I adapt. I get more help. I do whatever's necessary, but I don't give up on him. Thank you. Your witness. Ms. Brennan stood and Colt braced himself. Mr. Reiner, you testified that you left because you were chasing something. Isn't it true that you were running away from responsibility? Maybe both. And now you're back making promises. How do we know you won't leave again when things get hard? You don't? I can't prove the future. All I can do is show up today and tomorrow and every day after that until there are no more days. That's all anyone can do. You have no medical training? No. No experience with dementia care? Not professional experience, but I've spent the last 2 weeks learning everything I can. 2 weeks. And you think that's sufficient to care for someone with advanced dementia? No, but it's a start. And I've got people who can teach me the rest. You rode a bull 4 days ago and got seriously injured. You're sitting here in a sling with broken ribs. How can you possibly take care of your father when you can't even take care of yourself? Because I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'll keep standing as long as he needs me to. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Brennan stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. No further questions. Colt returned to his seat, feeling like he'd just been through another 8 seconds on Undertaker's back. Judge Henley called for closing statements. Ms. Brennan went first, summarizing the risks, the lack of resources, the danger of removing Wade from professional care. She painted Colt as well-meaning but ultimately irresponsible, someone whose good intentions would lead to tragedy. Frank countered with a closing that focused on dignity, autonomy, and the right to make choices about your own life, even when those choices weren't the safest ones. He talked about Wade as a person, not a patient, as someone who'd lived 81 years making his own decisions and deserved to keep making them for as long as he could. When both lawyers sat down, Judge Henley removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess, he said. Then I'll render my decision. The courtroom emptied into the hallway, and Colt found himself standing by a window, staring out at Main Street, wondering if he'd done enough. Mara appeared at his side. You did good in there. Didn't feel like it. It never does. She touched his good arm. Whatever happens, you fought. That matters. Claire was across the hall, talking quietly with her lawyer. At one point, she looked over at Colt and their eyes met. She didn't look angry anymore, just tired. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. When the bailiff finally called them back in, Colt's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might crack his already broken ribs. Judge Henley settled into his chair and opened the folder again. I've reviewed the evidence, he began. Heard the testimony. Considered the arguments. This is not an easy case. Both sides have valid points. The care facility is safe, professional, equipped to handle Wade Rayner's needs. Claire Rayner has fulfilled her duties as guardian admirably. But He paused, and Colt held his breath. Safety isn't the only factor this court must consider. Autonomy matters, dignity matters, and Wade Rayner, despite his cognitive impairment, has clearly and consistently expressed a desire to return home. Colt felt something crack open in his chest. Dr. Song's evaluation was thorough and compelling. Her conclusion that Wade retains decision-making capacity in this area is supported by the evidence. Therefore, I am prepared to grant Colt Rayner guardianship on the following conditions. First, the home must pass a safety inspection within 2 weeks. Second, Colt must establish a care plan with input from medical professionals and submit regular reports to the court. Third, if at any time Wade's condition deteriorates to the point where home care is no longer safe or feasible, guardianship will revert to Claire Rayner or to the state. Do you understand these conditions, Mr. Rayner? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Then this court grants you temporary guardianship of Wade Rayner for a period of 6 months, at which point we'll review the situation. If all goes well, it can become permanent. If not, Judge Henley looked at him over his glasses. You'll have a lot to answer for. I understand. I hope you do. Judge Henley signed the order. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and Colt felt like he could finally breathe. Frank was grinning, shaking his hand carefully around the sling. Mara was crying, trying to hide it, and failing. Hank gave him a thumbs up from the gallery. And Claire stood up slowly, collected her things, and walked toward the exit. But at the door she stopped and turned back. Don't make me regret this, she said quietly. I won't. If anything happens to him, I know. She nodded once, and then she was gone. They picked Wade up from the care center that afternoon. Colt signed the discharge papers with his good hand while Mara packed up Wade's belongings. Not much, just some clothes and the photograph of Evelyn that had been on his windowsill. Wade was in his chair when they came to get him, staring out at that damned courtyard with its single picnic table. Dad, Colt said, it's time to go home. Wade turned, and for a moment there was no recognition in his eyes. Then something cleared like clouds moving away from the sun. Home? He said. Yeah, home. To my house? Your house. Your bed. Your porch. Everything. Wade stood up slowly, and Colt saw tears tracking down the old man's weathered face. I thought I'd die here. Not today, not if I have anything to say about it. They walked out of the care center together, Wade, Colt, and Mara, and climbed into Mara's truck. The drive to Mesquite Road took 10 minutes, and Wade spent the entire time staring out the window like he was seeing the town for the first time. When they pulled up to the house, Wade just sat there for a moment, looking at the peeling paint and the sagging porch and the yard that needed mowing. It needs work, he said. We'll fix it, Colt said. Together. They helped him inside, and Wade walked through the room slowly, touching things. The wall where he'd marked the kids' heights as they grew, the kitchen table where they'd eaten 1,000 meals, the chair in the living room that was shaped like him. Evelyn loved this house, he said quietly. I know. She'd be happy you brought me back. I hope so. Wade sat down in his chair and closed his eyes, and for the first time since Colt had seen him in the care center, he looked at peace. The first few days were harder than Colt expected. Wade's sleep schedule was chaotic, up at 3 a.m, convinced he had to go to work, or looking for Evelyn, or trying to leave the house to run errands that didn't exist. Colt learned to sleep in short bursts, to wake at the slightest sound, to be ready for anything at any time. Mara came by every day after work, helping with meals and medications and the 100 small tasks that added up to care. Hank stopped in most evenings, sitting with Wade on the porch, talking about horses and weather and nothing in particular. Claire came by on the 4th day. She knocked on the door mid-morning, and Colt answered with flour on his hands from attempting to make pancakes. Wade's favorite, though he'd forgotten that twice already this morning. Can I come in? Claire asked. Yeah, of course. She walked into the house slowly, like she was expecting to find disaster. Instead, she found Wade sitting at the kitchen table working on a jigsaw puzzle Mara had bought, a picture of horses in a field. Hi, Dad, Claire said. Wade looked up. Claire, you came to visit. I did. That's nice. I like visitors. He went back to the puzzle, fitting a piece into place with the careful concentration of someone for whom this simple task was a victory. Claire turned to Colt. The house looks good. The safety stuff, you really did it. Had to. Judge's orders. How is he? Really? Some days are better than others. Yesterday he remembered my name all day. This morning he asked me 3 times who I was. But he's here. He's home. And he's, I don't know, happier? Maybe that's too strong a word, but less sad. Claire nodded, blinking hard. I was so angry at you. I know. I still am, a little, for leaving, for making me carry all of this alone. I'm sorry, for what it's worth. It's worth something. She looked back at Wade, at their father, who was humming to himself while he worked on the puzzle. Can I help? I don't mean take over. I mean just help. Come by sometimes. Sit with him. Give you a break. Yeah, I'd like that. Good. She walked over to the table and sat down next to Wade. That's a nice puzzle, Dad. Horses, Wade said. Evelyn loved horses. I remember. They worked on the puzzle together, and Colt stood in the doorway watching them, his sister and his father, fitting pieces together, and for the first time in years, something like family. The months that followed weren't easy. Wade had good days and bad days, and days where Colt wasn't sure which category they fell into. There were nights when Wade woke up screaming, convinced he was back in Korea, and Colt had to talk him down. There were mornings when Wade couldn't remember how to use a fork, and Colt had to feed him. There were afternoons when Wade looked at him with such clarity and said, "Thank you for bringing me home," and Colt had to leave the room before his father saw him cry. But there were victories too. Wade's garden came back to life. Tomatoes and peppers and herbs that he and Colt planted together, even though Wade forgot they'd done it the next day, and was delighted all over again when the first shoots appeared. The porch became their place, sitting out there in the evenings, watching the sun go down, not talking much but being together. Sometimes Wade remembered who Colt was. Sometimes he didn't. But it didn't matter as much anymore. Mara became a constant presence, so much so that Wade started calling her that nice girl you should marry. Colt never corrected him, and Mara never seemed to mind. The 6-month review came and went. Judge Henley reviewed the reports, all positive, and made the guardianship permanent. Claire testified in support of it, which surprised everyone, including Colt. On a warm evening in late spring, nearly a year after Colt had come back to Coldwater, they were all on the porch: Wade, Colt, Claire, Mara, and Hank. The garden was in full bloom. The house had fresh paint, and Wade was telling a story Colt had heard a dozen times about the time he rode his first horse at age 7 and fell off into a creek. "Did I ever tell you about that?" Wade asked when he finished. "A few times," Colt said, smiling, "but I don't mind hearing it again." "Good. I like that story." Wade looked around at all of them. "It's nice having everyone here. Like a family." "We are a family," Claire said quietly. "That's right. We are." Wade's eyes were bright and clear. "I'm glad I came home. This is where I belong." Later that night, after everyone had left and Wade was asleep in his own bed in his own house, Colt sat on the porch alone, looking up at the stars. His shoulder had healed, mostly. His ribs didn't hurt anymore. His knee still gave him trouble, but he'd learned to work around it. He pulled out his phone and looked at a text Mara had sent earlier. "Proud of you, for everything." He typed back, "Couldn't have done it without you." 3 dots appeared. Then, "I know, but you did it anyway." Colt smiled at that, pocketed his phone, and sat there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of his father breathing through an open window, to the crickets singing in the garden, to the wind moving through the trees his mother had planted 20 years ago. He'd spent 3 years on the road chasing something he could never catch, trying to be someone he'd stopped being. He'd lost everything, his career, his pride, the people he loved. But he'd come back, and in coming back, he'd found something better than glory. He'd found purpose. He'd found family. He'd found the strength to stay in one place long enough to do something that mattered. And in the end, maybe that was worth more than any championship buckle or cheering crowd or 8 seconds of temporary triumph. Maybe the hardest ride wasn't on the back of a bull. Maybe it was standing still facing your failures and choosing to stay when every instinct told you to run. Colt stood up, checked the locks on the doors, turned off the porch light, and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Wade would forget things. The care would be hard. There would be setbacks and struggles and moments when Colt wondered if he was doing any of this right. But he wasn't doing it alone anymore. And he wasn't running. He was home.